The key looked too small to ruin a family. It lay in the center of the dining table on a faded red string, between the folder containing Claire's new company shares and the silver pen Mason had used to sign for the lake condo. One old brass key, dark around the teeth. Grant Whitaker wouldn't touch it. The cabin outside Bellwether, he said. 12 acres if you count the slope nobody can stand on. Your mother left it to Owen. Nobody congratulated him. Owen stared at the key. 3 nights earlier, his mother had closed his fingers around it with what little strength she had left. See the place before you decide what it's worth. Now, his father offered him $5,000 for it. Why? Owen asked. Grant's face tightened. Because you need money, and I need this finished. What happens if I keep it? You won't. Owen picked up the key. Grant leaned back, studying him with a calm Owen recognized from the company dinners. The calm he used right before cutting someone loose. If you walk out with that, don't come back expecting tuition, a car, a room, or my name to save you, Claire whispered. Dad, no, let him understand. Grant looked straight at Owen. You want Rowan's old wreck so badly you can have it, but you do not get to reject this family and keep collecting its benefits. Owen wrapped the red string around his palm. He had inherited a cabin he had never seen, and in the same breath, his father had made him homeless. The strange part was that Grant looked more frightened than angry. The dining room had always been too formal for the 4 of them. Rowan used to complain that the chairs forced people to sit as if they were being painted for a bank lobby. Grant had laughed whenever she said it, then ordered 2 more matching chairs when the furniture line was discontinued. Her place at the table was empty now. Someone, probably Claire, had removed the water glass Rowan kept there during her last weeks, but a pale ring remained in the wood. Mason flipped his new pen between his fingers. At 26, he had Grant's broad shoulders and Rowan's habit of chewing the inside of his cheek when he was uncomfortable. Nobody's making you homeless. Oh, Dad's saying don't be dramatic over a building with possums in it. Raccoons, Grant said. Oh, good. Higher property values. Claire shot Mason a look. She was 28 and could silence a showroom manager by lifting one eyebrow, but around Grant, she still lowered her voice. Can we not do this today? We're already doing it, Owen said. The gathering had begun with coffee and a box of pastries nobody ate. Grant had stacked the estate papers in front of him, with the same precision he brought to quarterly meetings. He kept clearing his throat before saying Rowan's name. Once, halfway through explaining Claire's shares, he stopped to straighten the sleeve of the cardigan draped over the back of Rowan's chair. Owen had almost felt sorry for him. Then Mason got the lake condo because, Grant explained, he was the one who used it most. Claire received Rowan's remaining stake in Whitaker House because she had put 9 years into the company. Both decisions made practical sense. Grant specialized in decisions that made practical sense after he had arranged the world around them. Owen had spent the last 2 years driving Rowan to treatments, tracking her medications, and learning which restaurant soups she could keep down. That apparently qualified him for a collapsing cabin in a town no one had mentioned until her funeral flowers started wilting. Grant nudged a white envelope across the table. Property tax information. Utility records, such as they are. The transfer was handled with the rest of the estate. Owen opened it. The first photograph showed a 1-story log cabin crouched beneath bare trees. A sycamore leaned over the porch like it had stopped by to deliver bad news. Blue plastic covered part of the roof. Mason leaned sideways to see. That tarp might be the most valuable thing on it. Enough, Claire said, though the corner of her mouth twitched. Rowan would have laughed. That made it worse. Owen turned the photograph over. Nothing was written on the back. Did Mom ever live there? He asked. Grant gathered the signed papers into a neat pile. Briefly, alone. She was young. It wasn't an answer, and Grant knew it. Owen looked at Claire. She shook her head before he could ask. Mason had stopped spinning the pen. Their mother had designed furniture for a living, or at least that was how Grant told it, when magazines wanted a softer paragraph in the Whitaker House story. Grant had been the founder, the salesman, the visionary. Rowan had possessed, according to the official language, an instinct for warmth. It made her sound like she wandered into meetings carrying muffins and occasionally suggested beige. At home, she rarely spoke about the company's early years. When Owen once asked why her name wasn't on the framed patent certificates in Grant's office, she had told him that families were like old dressers. Pull too hard on the wrong drawer and the whole thing could tip. He had assumed she was joking. 5,000, Grant said again. I'll cover the taxes and demolition. Demolition? The roof has been failing for years. There may be mold, the chimney's unsafe, and there's no reliable water. I should have dealt with it sooner. Why didn't you? Rowan's cardigan slipped from the chair. Grant caught it before it touched the floor. His movements were unexpectedly gentle. Because it belonged to your mother, and now it belongs to me. Temporarily, if you have any sense. Owen rubbed the key between his thumb and forefinger. The metal held no warmth. She made me promise to see it. Grant folded the cardigan once, then again. She was medicated. The room went still. Claire stared at him. Mason set the pen down. Owen remembered his mother's hand in his. Weak, yes, trembling. But her eyes had been clear enough to make him lean close when she said Bellwether, because he had never heard the name before. Clear enough to add, don't let anybody describe it for you. Were you there? Owen asked. Grant's jaw shifted. I was her husband for 31 years. That isn't what I asked. And this isn't a trial. No. In a trial, people answer questions. Mason exhaled through his nose. Okay, everybody needs to take the temperature down about 600 degrees. Grant ignored him. You missed half a semester. Your grades are a mess. You have no job worth mentioning, and $180 in your checking account. $186. You think that helps? It makes your surveillance feel less accurate. Claire closed her eyes. For 1 second, Owen thought Grant might smile. His father's mouth almost changed shape. Then, the moment passed. I am offering you a clean solution, Grant said. Take the money, re-enroll full-time, move back into the residence hall when the term starts. In the meantime, your room is here. The room where Owen had slept for 4 hours at a time, between hospital nights. The room Grant had entered without knocking, the morning after Rowan died, to ask whether Owen knew the password to her tablet. What if I don't want the business program? Grant placed the folded cardigan on Rowan's chair. That again. It wasn't my choice. You chose it when you accepted the tuition. You chose it when I was still filling out the application. You were 19 and had no idea what you wanted. I'm 20 now. Mason gave a humorless laugh. Well, that clears up the maturity question. Owen looked at him. You got a condo. I work. You drink near a company. I manage regional accounts. You managed to lose your phone in regional bars. Mason's face reddened, but Claire spoke before he could. Owen, stop. He didn't make Mom leave you the cabin. That was true, which was probably why it hurt more than anything Grant had said. Owen looked down at the papers. Rowan had chosen Claire for the company, Mason for the lake, him for the wreck under the blue tarp. Maybe it was a judgment. Maybe Grant was right, and the drugs had softened some corner of her mind. Or maybe she had known exactly what she was doing, and believed Owen was the only one who could be trusted with something nobody else wanted. He could not tell which possibility scared him more. Grant extended his hand across the table. Give me the key. Owen stood. Owen, Claire said. Her voice held a warning and a plea, but not an offer. He put the papers back into the white envelope. I'll call after I see it. If you leave with that key, the conversation is over, Grant said. Owen waited for the usual correction. Not forever, not if you apologize, not after we've both cooled down. Grant supplied none. Mason stared at the table. Claire's fingers tightened around the folder, holding her shares. Owen slipped the key into his pocket. Grant nodded once, like a man accepting a resignation. Then take whatever belongs to you tonight. It took Owen 40 minutes to pack his life. Most of it fit into 2 duffel bags and 3 cardboard boxes left from Rowan's medical deliveries. Jeans, work boots, textbooks, a camp stove he had bought for a trip that never happened. He packed the navy sweater his mother said made him look trustworthy, though he had no idea what use that would be in a condemned cabin. From the hallway, he heard Mason open the refrigerator and say, "Anybody gonna eat this turkey?" It was such a Mason thing to say that Owen nearly laughed. Claire appeared in his doorway, holding a roll of trash bags. "Luxury luggage," she said. "I'm good. You're packing books in a box with no bottom." He looked. She was right. Claire taped the box without asking. She worked in silence, pressing each strip flat with her thumbnail. Rowan used to wrap gifts that way, as if the tape had personally offended her by wrinkling. "Dad doesn't mean forever," Claire said. "He was pretty specific. He's grieving. So am I. I know. Do you?" Her hand stopped. Owen regretted it immediately, but Claire only bit off another piece of tape and sealed the box. "Mom trusted you with the hard parts," she said. "That doesn't mean the rest of us didn't love her." "I didn't say it did. You think it loudly." Downstairs, a cabinet slammed. Claire lowered her voice. "Take the 5,000 after you see the place. You can still keep the promise. Why does he want it demolished? Because it's falling down?" He offered before I even saw the picture. "You have $186. Everybody keeps leaving off the 6, she laughed despite herself. One short sound that vanished almost at once. Then she hugged him. Claire was not a casual hugger. She held him hard enough that the corner of a textbook pressed into his ribs through the box between them. "Call me when you get there," she said. Owen carried the first load downstairs. Grant was in the kitchen making coffee he would not drink, measuring the grounds with absurd care. He did not turn around. Mason stood by the garage door with Owen's car keys. "Dad says the sedan stays." Owen stared at him. "It's in my name. It's in the company's. You told me it was mine." Mason winced. "I tell women I can cook. We all participate in aspirational language." Grant poured water into the machine. Owen shouldered his duffel. "How am I supposed to get to Bellwether?" After a moment, Mason tossed him the keys. "Bring it back tomorrow. I'll tell him you took it before I got here. You've been here all afternoon. I'll lie with nuance." It was the first kindness anyone had offered him all day, and Mason made sure it sounded disreputable. Owen loaded the car before Grant could object. As he backed out, he saw his father standing behind the kitchen window, one hand braced on the counter. Grant watched the car reach the street, then turned away. Bellwether was a little over 2 hours west, past towns that seemed to consist of a gas station, a church, and a hand-painted warning about fireworks. The sky lowered as Owen drove. By the time his phone lost service, rain had begun ticking against the windshield. The cabin waited at the end of a rutted road, with weeds growing down the middle. The photograph had been flattering. One porch post had slipped off its stone. The blue roof tarp flapped like something trying to escape. Wet leaves filled the sagging steps, and the sycamore's roots had pushed a ridge through the yard. Owen sat behind the wheel until the headlights began to dim. Then he took out the key. The front door had to be lifted before it would open. The smell inside was damp wood, cold ash, and animals with prior claims. His flashlight swept over a stone fireplace, a ladder to the loft, and a long workbench beneath the front windows. On the wall above it, someone had carved the outline of a small bell. Owen touched it with 2 fingers. The roof dripped into a metal bucket in the corner, each drop landing with the patience of a clock. He spent the night in the car. In the morning, stiff and furious, he drove back toward town in search of coffee, roofing nails, and someone willing to tell him whether the cabin was still standing by skill or habit. The hardware store's sign read, "Calder Son," though the only person inside was a gray-haired woman in red coveralls. Owen set the brass key on the counter while counting his cash. The woman looked at the red string. Then she looked at him. "Where?" she asked softly. "Did you get Rowan Bell's key?" Owen closed his fingers around the key. The woman's eyes followed it. They were pale blue and entirely unhurried. "It belonged to my mother." "Rowan?" He nodded. The woman rested both hands on the counter. Her fingernails were cut short, with a dark line of grease beneath one thumbnail. "Then you're one of Grant Whitaker's. I'm Owen. That wasn't what I asked." He wasn't sure how to answer, so he didn't. She studied his face long enough to make him aware of everything wrong with it. The night's stubble, the crease from sleeping against the car window, the red mark where the flashlight had pressed into his cheek. At last, she pulled a pair of reading glasses from her coveralls and put them on. "Ruth Calder," she said. "Your mother fixed that door." Owen looked behind him. The hardware store's front door was thick oak with an oval window and a brass push plate polished by decades of hands. What was wrong with it? Somebody backed a truck through it. Did she fix the truck too? Ruth's mouth moved at one corner. "You do have some of her in you." The words landed too easily for something he had wanted all his life to hear. At home, every comparison had been physical. Rowan's eyes, Rowan's narrow hands, Rowan's bad habit of going quiet when Grant wanted an answer. Nobody had ever said he had something in him that sounded useful. He set the white estate envelope on the counter and removed the photograph. "I need roofing nails, maybe tar paper, and somebody who can tell me if this chimney is about to fall through the house." Ruth examined the picture, although she didn't seem surprised by what she saw. "This recent?" "It was in the property file." "That doesn't answer me. I don't know." She tapped the blue tarp. That went on 6 years ago. You remember the tarp? I sold it. Did my mother buy it? Ruth looked at him over her glasses. Your mother hadn't been back in longer than that. Then who put it on? People. What people? The kind who don't like watching good work rot. That answer irritated him, mostly because it sounded rehearsed. It didn't bother them enough to fix the roof. 12 squares of cedar and a steep pitch are a little different from throwing up a tarp. I have asphalt shingles. Where? I was planning to buy them. With what? He pushed the photograph toward her. Can everybody here tell how much money I have by looking at me? Mostly by watching you count it twice. Owen glanced at the bills beside the register. He had laid out $40, then put 10 back, then added it again while she stared at the key. Ruth slid the photograph into the envelope. Don't buy roofing nails. The roof leaks. Roofs generally do when they have holes. So, I need nails. You need somebody on the ground who knows what he's looking at before you climb up there and turn one problem into three. I can pay for an inspection. No, you can't. The bell over the door gave a sharp jangle. A man entered carrying a cardboard drink tray in one hand and a coil of copper wire over his other shoulder. He was tall, lean, and damp from the rain, with black hair tied at the back of his neck. He set the drinks down and looked from Ruth to Owen. Did I interrupt a robbery? You'd have brought worse coffee if you had, Ruth said. I brought exactly the coffee you ordered. You brought what I order when you're paying. The man took a cup from the tray and passed it to her. That's how orders work. Ruth nodded toward Owen. This is Rowan Bell's son. The man nearly dropped his coffee. Owen was beginning to feel like an animal people had assumed was extinct. Jonah Calder, the man said. He shifted the wire and offered his free hand. Ruth's nephew, despite what the sign claims. What happened to the son? My dad moved to Arizona. Ruth refused to spend money on a new sign. The sign is accurate, Ruth said. He remains my son. Jonah's handshake was firm, without being theatrical. You staying up at the cabin? I spent last night there. In the cabin? The car. Good. Owen frowned. Good? The wiring in that place was cloth-covered when I saw it. If the mice haven't eaten it, time has. When did you see it? 6 years ago. We ran an extension from a temporary box so Walt Dobbins could patch the roof. The tarp. The legendary tarp, Jonah said. Owen looked between them. You've both been there. Ruth sipped her coffee. Did you know my mother? Jonah rubbed rain from his sleeve. Not really. I met her twice when I was old enough to know her. Ruth knew her. How well? Ruth set down the cup. Well enough to know she wouldn't want you buying cheap roofing nails. Did she build the cabin? There it was. The question had been waiting since he saw the bell carved over the workbench. He expected Ruth to qualify her answer, or ask what Grant had told him, or begin one of those careful explanations people offered after a death. Instead, she said, yes, by herself. No one builds anything entirely by themselves. But she designed it, cut the frame, laid the stone, set the windows, hung the doors, and corrected every fool who tried to help faster than he knew how. Owen tried to fit this woman into his mother's body. Rowan had struggled to open jars near the end. Even before she became ill, Grant hired people to fix things. When a hinge loosened, Rowan placed a strip of blue painter's tape beside it and waited for the maintenance man. Owen had thought she didn't know how. Grant said she lived there briefly. 3 years, Ruth said. He said she was poor. She was. The bluntness surprised him. Ruth continued. Poor isn't the same as helpless. Jonah leaned against the counter, watching Owen rather than his aunt. He had the wary expression of someone prepared to catch a cup before it fell. Why did she leave? Owen asked. To marry your father? That's it? No. Ruth took another drink. Owen waited. When she didn't continue, he said, You're not going to tell me? I've known you 6 minutes. You told me she built a house. The house can prove that. And the rest? The rest involves people who are alive enough to argue with me. Grant would have hated her. The thought arrived with such certainty that Owen nearly smiled. Jonah pulled the cabin photograph from the envelope. If this is what it looked like 6 years ago, you shouldn't be under that porch roof either. Last night you slept in the car, right? Ruth asked. Yes. Then you're learning. Owen put his money back in his wallet. I still need to do something today. You need breakfast. I need a roof. You're 20, Ruth said. That's why you think those are competing needs. She moved from behind the counter, took a green raincoat from a peg, and called toward the stockroom. Ed, I'm going up to Bell's place. A muffled voice answered. "Take the Ford. I was going to carry him on my back." "Don't scratch the Ford." Ruth pulled on her coat. Ed believes every truck is improved by owning it. Owen held up the car keys. "I have a ride. For how long?" He hesitated. Jonah gave a quiet whistle. "That long, huh?" "It belongs to my father's company. I have to take it back today." Ruth did not offer sympathy. He appreciated her for it. "We'll follow you," she said. "You don't have to do that." "Correct." She walked out before he could argue. They stopped at a diner 2 blocks away. Lenora's was painted across the front window in gold letters that had begun to peel at the edges. Ruth told Owen to leave his car where it was and steered him inside with one hand between his shoulder blades. The woman behind the counter looked up from filling a sugar dispenser. She was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and wore large hoop earrings with a white cook's apron. "Ruth, if you're here to complain about Tuesday's pie, I've decided you imagined it." You served apple filling in a pie-shaped bowl. It was deconstructed. It collapsed. That was the construction. Then the woman saw Owen. The sugar dispenser slipped in her hand. A bright stream scattered across the counter. "Oh," she said. Owen braced himself. She came around the counter and stopped a few feet away, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was softer than Ruth's and harder to bear. "You have Rowan's whole face when you're tired." "I've heard the face part." "Well, people say eyes when they're trying not to mention somebody's ears." Jonah coughed into his fist. Owen touched one ear. "What's wrong with them?" "Nothing if you keep your hair a reasonable length." She offered her hand. "Lenora Price." "Owen." "I know." He glanced at Ruth. Ruth was already taking her regular stool. "Don't blame me. Bellwether had the telephone before you arrived." Lenora guided Owen into a booth. "Eggs? I should get moving. Toast?" "I don't have much. Eggs come with toast." Ruth opened a menu she clearly didn't need. "Stop resisting." "She'll add potatoes out of spite." Lenora added potatoes. The food appeared so quickly Owen suspected she had been cooking it before he walked in. He told himself he would eat half. Then he cleaned the plate with the last corner of toast, while Ruth and Jonah argued over whether a local contractor had ruined a Victorian porch by using composite trim. Nobody asked about Rowan while he ate. That kindness felt more deliberate than any condolence he had received at the funeral. At the register, Owen laid down cash. Lenora pushed it back. "I can pay. I know. I'm not looking for charity." "Good, because I'm looking for labor. 3rd booth wobbles, 2 counter stools need regluing, and the cabinet under my sink was built by a man who hated right angles. I don't know how to fix furniture." Lenora looked toward Ruth. "He doesn't know?" "Apparently not." "Know what?" Ruth zipped her raincoat. "Eat first, panic second." "I already ate." "Then your schedule's clear." Rain followed them up the mountain. Jonah drove the Calder Sun Ford behind Owen, Ruth visible in the passenger seat, with one elbow propped against the window. When Owen turned onto the cabin road, the company's sedan's tires spun in the mud. He accelerated, made it another 6 feet, and sank to the axle. Ruth got out beneath a yellow umbrella. "Don't say it," Owen called through the open window. She surveyed the buried tire. "I wasn't going to." Jonah climbed out and studied the mud. She absolutely was. Together they pushed while Owen eased the car backward. Mud sprayed Jonah's jeans and struck Ruth's raincoat. Ruth didn't flinch. Once the sedan reached firmer ground, Owen parked beside the road. They walked the remaining distance carrying Jonah's toolbox. In daylight, with 2 people who knew buildings staring at it, the cabin looked more embarrassed than abandoned. Ruth circled without speaking. Jonah tested the porch with one boot, declined to put his full weight on it, and entered through the leaning door. Owen followed him inside. Jonah aimed a flashlight at the ceiling. "Don't touch any switches." "I didn't." "Outlets?" "No." "Excellent. We've established a baseline of good judgment." Ruth stood at the workbench. She brushed dust from its edge, then ran her palm over the carved bell above it. For the first time since Owen had met her, she looked uncertain. "She made this mark on everything she built before Grant," Ruth said. Owen stepped beside her. In the morning light, he saw shallow lines he had missed at night. Names penciled beneath the bench, measurements, dates, small calculations written directly on the wall. Ruth touched one of the older marks. Then she looked at Owen's hands. "Let's see," she said, "if she left you any sense to go with those ears." "Sense about what?" Ruth pointed toward the nearest window. "Tell me why it won't open." Owen looked at the sash. Paint sealed its edges, and the wood at the lower corners had gone gray. It's old. So am I. I open. Jonah set his toolbox beside the fireplace. Most mornings, Ruth ignored him. Owen stepped closer. He tried to remember the house inspections Grant had brought him to during the company's showroom expansion. Those men had spoken in a language of tolerances and loads while Owen carried coffee. The frame's crooked, he said. Why? Because the wall moved? What moved the wall? He looked toward the floor. A dark stain spread beneath the window, but the boards did not sag. Outside, the sycamore crowded that side of the cabin. The roots? No. The roof leaking? Closer. Ruth touched the top right corner of the trim. Water gets behind here. Wood swells, sash binds. Force it and you'll break the window before you fix the leak. Owen let his hand fall from the handle. Better than nothing, she said. That was praise, wasn't it? Don't get dependent. Jonah removed the cover from an outlet with an insulated screwdriver. Something dry and brown crumbled onto the floor. Mouse? Owen asked. Mouse residence, Jonah said. Previous owner vacated abruptly. Ruth walked the perimeter of the main room, tapping boards with the rubber handle of a chisel she had pulled from Jonah's box without permission. The cabin consisted of the large room, a narrow kitchen corner, a tiny washroom added onto the rear, and the loft above. Owen had assumed the logs themselves formed the structure, but Ruth showed him the heavy squared timbers behind them, fitted together in joints held with wooden pegs. Rowan cut these by hand, he asked. With help on raising day? She did the joinery. He touched one of the pegs. How long would that take? For you? In general, a summer if you know what you're doing. Longer if you spend your time asking how long. Ruth crouched near the fireplace and pushed her chisel into a floorboard. The point sank farther than Owen liked. This section's gone, she said. Roof sends water down the chimney. Water sits against the stone. Rot takes the floor. Maybe part of the sill beneath it. How bad is that? She stood. Bad, but fixable. Everything is fixable if you have enough material, labor, and stubbornness. I have one of those. Which? He's a Whitaker, Jonah called from the wall. Take a guess. Owen watched Ruth inspect the beam above the fireplace. What would it cost to make the place livable? She continued looking upward. How livable? Heat, water, electricity, no animals. You negotiate with the animals separately. I'm serious. So am I. You keep asking one question as if the cabin is one problem. It's 50 problems leaning against each other. You decide which one gets to hurt you first. The roof. The road, Jonah said. Nobody's bringing material up that mud chute. The roof causes more damage every time it rains, Owen said. The road decides whether the roof gets repaired. Ruth nodded toward him. That's 2 pieces of sense. Don't spend them both today. Jonah found the electrical panel in a shallow cabinet beside the kitchen. Its door bore a faded sticker shaped like a trout. He opened it, leaned back, and made a thoughtful sound. Owen did not like the sound. What? You ever watch somebody use a butter knife to repair a toaster? No. This has that energy. He pointed to mismatched breakers, cloth-wrapped wire, and a length of newer cable that entered through a hole without a clamp. Somebody added the washroom and tried to make the panel accommodate their optimism. Service is disconnected, which is the best feature. How much? For a safe partial rewire? Materials alone, maybe $1,800. More once I see the crawl space. Owen had the same feeling he'd had when Rowan's hospital bills arrived. The numbers were written in English, but not in a language where his choices mattered. I could do the labor, he said. Jonah looked at him. If somebody showed me some of it. You can drill holes and pull cable. You cannot learn electrical theory through confidence. I'm not confident. That does move you ahead of several licensed men I know. Ruth opened the rear door. It stuck halfway, then scraped across the floor with a low groan. Beyond it, the washroom smelled of wet leaves. A section of ceiling had collapsed into the old clawfoot tub. Ferns grew through a gap near the foundation. Owen stared. That feels personal. Jonah came up behind him. On the bright side, ventilation's excellent. Ruth pushed the door shut. Forget this room. You can get by without it. People generally need bathrooms. People existed before indoor plumbing. Not happily. You're not shopping for happy yet. They moved outside. Rain had weakened to a mist, and the woods dripped around them. Ruth made Owen stand back while she studied the roofline. The chimney tilted away from the ridge, opening a black seam in the flashing. Several cedar shingles had curled. The blue tarp covered the worst section, but one corner had torn free and snapped in the wind. Jonah pointed. "That's your first job. Secure the tarp before the next storm. You just said not to go on the roof. I said you shouldn't be under the porch roof. The main roof might hold if you walk the rafters." "Might?" Ruth glanced at Jonah. "You're going up first. I had coffee with you. Haven't I suffered enough?" They found an extension ladder beneath the cabin, green with mildew, but solid. Jonah climbed while Ruth steadied it. He moved carefully, testing each step on the roof before shifting his weight. Owen watched from below, arms folded against the cold. "Rafter ends look good," Jonah called. "Shingles are rough, tarp's useless." "Can it be reset?" Ruth asked, with more battens. Owen found warped strips of wood stacked near the porch. "These?" Ruth examined them. "Those are ash. Too good to waste on a tarp." "They're gray and bent. So are plenty of useful people." She located a pile of narrow pine boards beneath the workbench and chose 4. Owen carried them outside with a hammer and a bucket of nails from Jonah's truck. When he reached for the ladder, Ruth blocked him. "Foot it first." "I thought Jonah was teaching me." "I'm teaching you not to kill Jonah." Owen planted his boots against the ladder's feet while Jonah came down. Then Jonah showed him how to tie a rope around the bucket, climb with both hands free, and keep his weight over the roof's underlying frame. The height was only 12 feet, but the wet ground looked farther away. Owen's first step onto the shingles made them groan. "Rafter runs straight up from your left foot," Jonah said. "Stay on that line." Owen crawled toward the torn tarp. From the ridge, he could see the narrow road, Ruth's truck, the stranded sedan, and beyond them, a fold of wooded hills blurred by rain. The cabin's chimney rose beside him, its mortar cracked and softened. He reached for it to steady himself. "Don't!" Ruth and Jonah shouted together. Owen froze. A piece of mortar dropped from the chimney and bounced down the roof. "Point received," he said. Working on his knees, he helped Jonah pull the tarp tight and nail battens across its edges. He struck his thumb twice. The third time, the hammer glanced from the nail head and tore the tarp. Ruth looked up. "It's a small hole," Owen said. "It'll grow. I can patch it." "With what?" He had no answer. Jonah handed him a roll of heavy waterproof tape from his jacket. "Always bring something to repair what you repair." They finished in 40 minutes. When Owen stepped back onto the ladder, his arms trembled from tension. Ruth pretended not to notice until he reached the ground. "Your boots are wrong," she said. "They're work boots. They're fashion boots. Somebody roughed up at the factory so you'd feel experienced." He looked down at the expensive brown boots Grant had bought for a company photo shoot. The tread was shallow, and one toe bore an artful scuff applied before purchase. "Can I add boots to the 50 problems?" 51. His phone vibrated in his pocket. The weak signal delivered 5 messages at once. 3 were from Claire. The first asked whether he had arrived. The second asked him to please answer. The third said Grant had canceled his card and would shut off his phone at the end of the billing cycle. Mason's message read, "Car today. He is counting the hours like a Bond villain." The final notification came from his bank. A recurring tuition payment had attempted to process against the card Grant had canceled. The balance on the screen was $186.42. Ruth looked at his face. "What happened?" "I have to return the car." "How are you getting back?" "Bus?" "There's one from Lexington at 6:10, Jonah said. "Drops downtown here at 8:40 if the driver's in a good mood. That's almost 3 hours. It visits communities you didn't know required visiting." Owen calculated fuel, bus fare, and the rides he would need at both ends. "I can do that." Ruth glanced at the boxes visible through the sedan's rear window. "Unload first." They carried his belongings into the cabin. Jonah set the boxes on the workbench to keep them off the damp floor. Ruth placed the duffel bags in the loft, after testing every rung of the ladder and criticizing 2. Owen found an old broom behind the kitchen door and began sweeping mouse droppings and leaf fragments from the driest corner. Ruth watched for a moment, then went to her truck and returned with a canvas folding cot. "I can't pay for that," he said. "It belongs to the store." "What does the store use it for?" "Loaning to stubborn men who inherit cabins." "That happens often?" "First time. We're diversifying." Jonah took a small battery lantern from his toolbox and set it on the workbench. Bring this back when you have electricity. That might be a while. I've had it 9 years. I'm prepared to wait. They left after making him promise not to light the fireplace or touch the wiring. Ruth said he could come to the store in the morning if he wanted paid work. She emphasized that she was offering lifting and cleanup, not carpentry. Owen drove the sedan out once the road had dried enough for Jonah to pull it free with the Ford. At the highway, he stopped for gas. His canceled card failed twice before he remembered Claire's message. The cashier watched him count $30 onto the counter. When Owen returned to the pump, he found an envelope tucked inside the center console. Mason was written across the front in his brother's blocky handwriting, then crossed out and replaced with, "For gas, idiot." Inside were $80 and the spare key to the lake condo. Owen stood beside the pump, with rain spotting the envelope. He put the money in his wallet. The condo key he returned to the envelope, uncertain whether it was an invitation, an apology, or merely another place his family believed he would choose over the cabin. Owen drove the rest of the way with Mason's envelope on the passenger seat. The rain stopped as he reached the suburbs, leaving the roads glossy beneath a weak afternoon sun. Mud had dried in brown fans along the sedan's doors. A strip of pine needle clung to one windshield wiper. The car looked as if it had briefly escaped its intended life. Grant's SUV was in the driveway. Owen parked beside it and sat with both hands on the wheel. He could leave the keys in the mailbox and walk away. He could text Mason, catch a ride to the bus station, and avoid one more conversation in which Grant spoke like the world had already voted. Instead, he took the envelope and went inside. Grant was kneeling in the dining room with a spray bottle and a white towel, cleaning mud from the floor. Owen stopped in the doorway. "How did mud get in here?" "Your boxes?" "I carried them out before it rained. The bottoms were dirty." Grant scrubbed at a mark Owen could barely see. Rowan's cardigan was no longer on her chair. The estate papers were gone. Only the silver pen remained in front of Mason's empty place. Owen set the car keys on the table. "It's back." Grant kept wiping. "You were told noon. I got stuck. So I see. The road's bad. Another excellent feature." Owen waited for him to stand. Grant had always disliked conversations conducted at different heights. At company dinners, he would rise when someone approached the table, even if they only wanted the salt. Now he remained on one knee, folding the towel to find a clean section. "Mom built it," Owen said. Grant's hand stopped. Not for long, a second, maybe less. Then he sprayed the floor again. "Who told you that?" There it was, the same fear Owen had seen when he took the key. People who knew her, people in Bellwether, knew a version of her. Did she? Grant looked up. Did Mom know that version of herself? "You've been there one night, and now you're speaking in riddles." She cut the frame, laid the stone, hung the doors. She had help. Ruth Calder said that. At the name, Grant stood. His knee gave a small crack that both of them pretended not to hear. Ruth enjoys making everything sound like a folk song. She owns a hardware store. Those are not mutually exclusive. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That your mother had a house before she met me? Most adults do things before marriage. Did she build the furniture there? Grant dropped the towel onto the table. It left a wet gray fold beside the silver pen. You have met two people who want to impress Rowan's son. They've had years to improve the story. The mark over the workbench is hers. Owen expected denial. Grant gave him something worse. Impatience. Yes, the bell. She put it on everything. Everything she built before you. Did Ruth say that too? She didn't have to. I've never seen it on anything at Whitaker House. Grant picked up the car keys. You have no idea what you've seen at Whitaker House. Then show me. Show you what? Her work. Grant turned the keys over in his palm. Your mother contributed to the company from the beginning. Nobody disputes that. Contributed. Yes, Owen. Contributed. That is a real word, not an insult. You're listed as the designer on the early collections. Because I was. And she was what? Warm? Grant's face changed. Owen knew immediately that he had found the place to hurt him. That didn't make it feel good. The company's biography described Rowan's influence as bringing warmth to Grant's disciplined modern vision. It appeared in catalogs, on the website, and on the bronze plaque in the flagship showroom. Grant had repeated it so often that Owen could hear the cadence without trying. Your mother chose to step away, Grant said. She hated interviews. She hated negotiations. She hated having every object reduced to a number. That sounds like you hated having her in the room. You want to know why she left the cabin? Because she was tired of bargaining over eggs and firewood. She was tired of a roof she had to patch herself, and customers who praised her tables while asking for another month to pay. I gave her an alternative. Did she ask you to erase the first life? I did not erase anything. You never even told me her name was Rowan Bell. It was her maiden name. She carved it into a wall. She married me. The answer came too fast and too loud. Grant heard it too. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Mason entered from the kitchen, carrying a turkey sandwich wrapped in a paper towel. He looked from Grant to Owen and stopped chewing. This appears private, he said through the mouthful. You gave him money, Grant said. Mason swallowed. That appears to be a statement. Grant held up the car keys. You told me you couldn't stop him taking the sedan. I couldn't stop him emotionally. You handed him the keys. He was carrying 3 boxes. I saw my opening and failed to act. This is not funny. No, but it's long. Owen took Mason's envelope from his jacket and put it on the table. Mason looked at it. You used the gas money? Some. Keep the rest. I'll pay you back. Sure. Owen removed the condo key and placed it beside the envelope. Mason's expression closed. That wasn't a loan, he said. I know. Then why are you giving it back? Because I'm not moving into your condo. I didn't ask you to move in. I gave you somewhere with plumbing if the forest house attacks. Grant's gaze moved between them. So, this is what we're doing now? Secret money and spare keys? It stopped being secret when you narrated it, Mason said. Owen pushed the key toward him. Mason didn't pick it up. Claire came down the hallway wearing navy trousers and one of Rowan's old cream blouses beneath her coat. She carried a black portfolio against her chest. At the sight of Owen, she exhaled. You didn't answer. I was driving. Your phone works in a moving car. That feature is generally discouraged. She looked toward Grant. I'm taking him to the station. I didn't ask you to, Owen said. The bus leaves in 40 minutes. Mason checked the wall clock. With traffic, 38 minutes would have been more comforting. Claire grabbed Owen by the sleeve. Let's go. Outside, she walked quickly to her car. Owen had to duck back into the house because Mason called after him. His brother stood in the foyer and held out the condo key. Owen, I'm not taking it, then don't take it. Mason shoved it into the pocket of Owen's jacket, failed to notice it. Grant was visible behind him, standing beside the dining table. He seemed suddenly older in the empty room, but he was not looking at Owen. He was looking at Rowan's chair. Mason lowered his voice. Dad's anniversary campaign has everybody crazy. Don't send him cabin pictures. Don't send anybody cabin pictures. I wasn't planning to. Good. Why? Mason glanced back. Because marketing thinks history is a color palette. He shut the door before Owen could ask what that meant. Claire drove like she did everything else, efficiently, without conversation, and a little faster than necessary. Rowan's perfume lingered in the car, faint enough that Owen wondered if he imagined it. At a red light, Claire said, Does it have heat? No. Water? Rust? Electricity? Only in theory. She tightened both hands on the wheel. Take Dad's money. Mom built it. The light turned green. The car behind them honked before Claire moved. What do you mean built it? What does built mean? Don't be a jerk. She designed it, cut the timbers, put it up. Mom didn't know how to build a cabin. That's what I thought. Claire changed lanes without signaling. Who told you? Ruth called her. She knew her. And you trust this woman? I trust that she knew what the bell over the workbench meant. Claire looked at him, then back at the road. What bell? He told her. She shook her head once. I've seen that. Where? I don't know. You just said, it's familiar. She pressed her lips together. Maybe on sketches, in the archive room. What sketches? We have thousands of drawings, Owen. I'm not saying they're hers. Look, I have actual work to do. Then it shouldn't take long to prove me wrong. Claire pulled into the bus station drop-off lane. You've known about this place for less than a day, and you're already making it a test everybody else has to pass. That's not what I'm doing. It's what Mom did. The words seemed to surprise her as much as him. Claire stared through the windshield. Toward the end. Everything became proof that we were on Dad's side. I was at the hospital. You think I don't know that? I think you were at work. Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed level. Somebody had to be. A bus turned into the terminal, brakes sighing. Claire got out and opened the trunk. Owen had no luggage. They stood behind the car anyway, separated by the raised lid. Finally, she reached in and took out a fleece-lined jacket. "You'll freeze in that coat," she said. "I'm fine. I'm not giving you a house. Take the jacket." It was one of Mason's old company jackets, the Whitaker House logo embroidered over the chest. Owen put it on without comment. Claire hugged him quickly. "Text when the bus gets there. If my criminally generous phone service survives. Don't joke like Mason, one is enough." She drove away before he boarded. The bus reached Bellwether 20 minutes late. Jonah waited at the curb in the hardware store's Ford, eating peanuts from a vending machine packet. "How did you know which bus? There is one bus. Ruth sent you?" "No." Ruth strongly suggested I make my own decision, then put the truck keys in my hand. He drove Owen up the mountain in darkness. At the cabin, the repaired tarp held. Jonah carried the lantern inside, checked that Owen had not touched the breaker panel, and left him with 2 bottles of water and half the peanuts. The cot creaked beneath Owen. Wind moved through the broken washroom ceiling, and something scratched once beneath the floorboards, then stopped. He fell asleep, wearing the Whitaker House jacket. Cold woke him before dawn. Pale light pressed against the window Ruth had warned him not to force. Condensation fogged the glass, and the cabin smelled stale. Owen wanted air. He braced one hand beneath the sash and pushed carefully. It didn't move. He pushed harder. The wood split with a dry, unmistakable crack. The bottom rail came loose in his hands. Owen stood in the gray morning, holding a piece of the window his mother had built, less than 12 hours after Ruth told him not to break it. Owen lowered the broken rail, as if moving slowly could reverse the sound. A thin wedge of wood had torn away from one corner. The glass remained intact, held inside the upper frame by dry putty, but the sash now hung crooked from its cord. Cold air slid through the opening he had wanted and touched his face. "Great," he whispered. "Plenty of ventilation." He found an old dish towel in a kitchen drawer and wrapped the loose piece. The drawer contained bent nails, 2 cabinet pulls, a corkscrew, and a carpenter's pencil, sharpened flat instead of round. He put the pencil back exactly where he had found it. The walk to town took an hour and 12 minutes. Owen knew because his phone counted every miserable step. The road that had trapped the sedan was merely damp now, though each passing truck found a new part of his jeans to cover in mud. Claire's borrowed jacket was too warm once the sun rose. Ruth had been right about his boots. The expensive leather pinched both heels, and the decorative factory scuffs had been joined by authentic damage. He carried the broken rail beneath one arm. At Calder's son, Ed was rolling bags of concrete mix onto a pallet. He was a thick-bodied man in his 60s with a white mustache and a green apron tied high over his stomach. He looked at the wood, looked at Owen's muddy boots, and pointed toward the rear counter. "She's back there. You're Ed?" "That's what she calls me when customers are present." Ruth stood behind a workbench sorting plumbing fittings into gray bins. She glanced up. Her eyes went directly to the wrapped rail. Owen placed it on the bench and opened the towel. "I broke the window." Ruth examined the split. "How?" "I pushed it." "What did I tell you? That water had swollen the frame." "What else?" "Not to force it." "And then?" "I forced it." Ed passed the end of the aisle with another bag of concrete. He learns fast. Ruth lifted the rail and inspected both ends. Original glass break? No. Cord? Still attached on the left. "I stopped touching things after this. That might be the smartest decision you've made." "I'm sorry." She put the wood down. "Don't apologize to me. It isn't my window. That was somehow harsher than being yelled at." Owen unzipped the Whitaker House jacket. "Can it be repaired?" "Yes." "How much?" Ruth's gaze sharpened. "There it is." "What?" "You see damage and ask for a price before you ask what the repair takes. Price determines whether I can do it." "No, price determines whether you can hire it done." The bell over the front door jingled. Ruth looked past Owen, and the small change in her face made him turn. A tall man with an angular, weathered face entered carrying a paper sack. He wore a canvas coat polished dark at the cuffs and a gray beard trimmed close along his jaw. He moved without hurry, but nothing about him seemed relaxed. He stopped when he saw Owen. Unlike Ruth and Lenora, he showed no surprise. His eyes went to the embroidered company name on Owen's jacket, then to the broken rail. So, he lasted a night. the man said. Ruth folded the dish towel over the wood. Good morning to you, Silas. Is it? That depends on whether you bought donuts, flue cement, then no. Silas placed the sack on the counter. Which window? Front right side, Owen said. I asked Ruth. Owen waited for Ruth to answer. She didn't. Front right side, he repeated. Silas's eyes moved over his face with none of Ruth's curiosity. You forced it. I did. Rowan fitted that sash twice because the first time she left a 16th more play than she wanted. Owen looked at the rail beneath the towel. You were there? I was often there. You helped build the cabin. Silas's expression hardened. Rowan built it. Ruth said people helped. People held beams, hauled stone, and ate her food. Helping is not building. Ruth set a brass elbow fitting into the proper bin. Silas believes verbs should be rationed. Owen held out his hand. I'm Owen. Silas looked at it, but did not take it. I know who Grant Whitaker's son is. Rowan's son, Ruth said. He arrived in a Whitaker jacket. It's warm. Silas addressed Owen again. That company sells a dining table based on one Rowan made for Lenora, calls it the Founder's Table. Owen lowered his hand. I didn't name it. No, you just wore it up here. I walked 5 miles. I wasn't going to carry the jacket so you could judge me accurately. Ed paused at the end of the aisle. Ruth's mouth twitched. Silas did not smile. Man raised by Grant Whitaker, he said, will always look for the price before he sees the work. You heard that? I heard enough. Then tell me what the work takes. Silas stared at him. Owen pulled the towel back. The lower rail split at the joint. The glass didn't break. The wood feels dry, except near the outside corner. I don't know whether you can re-glue it or if the whole rail needs replacing. Silas picked up the piece at last. He ran one finger along the torn grain, then smelled the wood. What are you doing? Owen asked, seeing what it is. With your nose? Heart pine holds resin. Even old wood has a smell when it's opened. Owen leaned closer. Beneath the cabin's dampness and the dust of the store, the split edge carried a faint, sharp scent. New pine won't match this, Silas said. Grain's too wide, growth too fast. You save the rail. Clean the joint without cutting away what still fits. Replace the missing wedge with a piece that follows the grain. Raglue, clamp square, reset the corner peg. There's a peg. There was before you tore through it. Can you show me? No. Silas returned the rail to the towel. Ruth, put the cement on my account. He left without another word. Ed waited until the door closed. That was almost friendly. Ruth nodded. For Silas, practically an embrace. Owen rewrapped the rail. Who is he? Silas Bell, Rowan's older cousin. How much older? Enough to believe every mistake made after 1978 confirms his worst suspicions. Why didn't anybody mention him? You've known us one day. We haven't mentioned the mayor either. Did he and my mother stay close? Ruth turned back to the fittings. Not at the end. Why? He told her what he thought of Grant. Rowan told him what she thought of people who confuse cruelty with honesty. Was Silas right? Being right is not permission to be cruel. Owen looked toward the door. Silas's truck passed the window, an old red pickup with a rack of lumber over the bed. Will he repair the sash? No. You sounded confident it could be fixed. It can. By who? Ruth slid a green apron across the bench. Depends how you do it following instructions. The apron carried the faded Calder-Sun logo and the name Bud written in permanent marker above the pocket. Who's Bud? Man who retired 12 years ago. Don't dishonor him. Ruth put Owen to work unloading 40-pound bags of potting soil from a delivery truck. After that came boxes of pipe fittings, furnace filters, and a carton of work gloves labeled medium that contained 3 different sizes. Ed showed him where everything belonged, then vanished whenever Owen had a question. By noon, Owen's shoulders burned and both heels had opened into blisters. Ruth brought him a roll of gauze tape and watched him wrap one foot. I told you about the boots. I was there. You want to borrow a pair of Ed's? No, they'll be too wide and smell like onions. Strong, no. She paid him in cash for the morning. Owen counted automatically. Ruth noticed. Short, no. Then don't count in front of me like I'm a vending machine. I count everything. Why? The honest answer came before he could replace it. Because things disappear. Ruth did not ask what things. She handed him a paper cup of coffee. Lenora sent a sandwich. She says it isn't part of your wages, so don't make a speech. The sandwich was roast beef, thick enough that Owen could not pretend it was left over by accident. He ate on the loading dock beside Ed, who peeled an orange in one continuous strip. Silas comes in most Fridays, Ed said. It's Thursday. Then you cause special circumstances. Does he hate my father? Ed separated an orange segment. Hates a hobby. Silas works. That doesn't answer me. I sell paint. After lunch, Ruth set the broken rail on the back workbench and made Owen remove the old corner peg with a narrow punch. His first strike missed. His second struck too hard. Are you trying to punish it? She asked. No. Then stop swinging like it insulted your mother. He adjusted his grip. That's worse. You said softer. I did not say limp. For nearly an hour, he moved the peg less than half an inch. Ruth came and went, correcting the angle, refusing to take the hammer from him. When it finally slid free, Owen felt a ridiculous flash of victory. The joint did not separate cleanly. Torn fibers held the pieces together, and a dark line of old glue clung inside. Now what? He asked. Now you stop. I just started. You're tired. Tired hands steal material. I can clean the glue. With what? Owen examined the tools laid out nearby. Chisels, scrapers, a block plane, files. He reached for the narrowest chisel. Ruth slapped the bench beside his hand. No, he jerked back. You could explain before I fail. You reached before you looked. What am I looking for? The grain. Old glue sits on top. Wood runs through. You remove one without cutting the other. She angled a lamp over the joint. Under the light, Owen could see the difference. Glue dull and brown, pine fibers glossy at their torn edges. Tomorrow, Ruth said. I need to cover the window. Jonah has plywood scraps. I can walk them up. You can barely walk yourself. As if summoned by insult, Jonah entered from the front carrying a box of electrical switches. He took one look at Owen's taped heel and shook his head. Fashion boots. Apparently the town has issued a statement. Jonah drove him back after closing with a plywood rectangle, screws, and a battery drill. At the cabin, he showed Owen how to fasten the cover through the exterior trim without damaging the window frame. The plywood blocked nearly a quarter of the morning light. Inside, the room felt smaller. Owen hung Claire's jacket on a peg by the door and stood before the workbench. Ruth had kept the broken rail at the store, but one tiny sliver had fallen into the dish towel and followed him home. He set it beneath the carved bell. His phone lit with a message from Claire. I found the mark. A photograph arrived beneath it, a yellowed furniture sketch on a gray archive table. In the bottom corner, drawn smaller than a thumbnail, was the same bell Rowan had carved into the cabin wall. Before Owen could answer, 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Owen typed, "What does that mean?" Claire did not answer. He called. The phone rang 6 times before she picked up, and when she did, he could hear voices and the clink of glass behind her. I'm at dinner, she said. With Dad? With the anniversary team. Did you show him? No. Why not? Because I found it 7 minutes ago. Owen opened the photograph again. The sketch showed a long dining table with legs joined by low cross pieces. Notes crowded the margins in Rowan's unmistakable handwriting, the letters slanting forward as if they were impatient with the pencil. How old is that drawing? There's no date on the page. Is it the founder's table? Claire lowered her voice. It looks like an early version. Silas said Mom made the original for Lenora. Silas? Her cousin? A pause. We have a cousin named Silas? She did. That isn't what I asked. Owen almost laughed. You sound like Ruth. I don't know who Ruth is, the woman who told me Mom built the cabin. She was right. One mark on one sketch doesn't prove every other thing she says. I didn't say it did. You're saying it like you want it to. In the background, somebody called Claire's name. She answered that she would be right there. Owen sat on the cot. Where did you find the drawing? In the lower archive room. There are flat files from the original workshop. Dad's workshop, the company's. Were there more with the bell? I only opened one drawer. Open the others. You don't get to assign me work because you moved into a ruin. I'm asking you to look. No, you're asking me to choose your version before I understand what I'm looking at. Our mother's name isn't a version, and our father isn't a cartoon villain because you're angry at him. Owen looked toward the plywood covering the window. The tiny sliver of heart pine lay beneath the bell, pale against the blackened workbench. Did Mom ever tell you she designed the founder's table? No. Then somebody left it out. Or she didn't want credit. Dad said she chose to step away. Maybe she did. Did she choose that, or did she choose the version that let her stay married? Claire went quiet. The restaurant sound seemed louder through the phone. You were always better at making questions sound like accusations, she said. You were always better at answering accusations nobody made. That one, for instance. Someone called her again. Claire exhaled. I'll look when I can. Don't send the picture anywhere. I wasn't going to. I mean it. Those archives belong to the company. They're Mom's drawings. They are company property. There it was. Claire's inheritance speaking in the calm vocabulary Grant trusted. Owen ended the call before he said something he could not take back. The temperature dropped after midnight. The borrowed cot preserved every movement as a squeak, and cold air found the gaps around the plywood. Owen slept in his jeans and Mason's old jacket, waking whenever the roof snapped or some animal crossed the leaves outside. At 5:30, he surrendered. The carpenter's pencil was still in the kitchen drawer. He used it to make a list on the back of one of Grant's estate pages. Roof, road, floor by chimney, water, wiring, washroom, porch, window. He added boots. Then he circled roof and road until the pencil point broke. Jonah's truck came up the ruts a little after 7. He leaned across to open the passenger door. Ruth said, if I let you walk again, she'll hold me personally responsible for your feet. She has strong feelings about footwear. She owns a hardware store. Feet are a profit center. Owen climbed in. A pair of used work boots sat on the floorboard. No, they're mine. Still no, they don't smell like onions. I'm not accepting your boots. You're not accepting them. You're wearing them until yours stop bleeding into Ruth's inventory. Owen looked at Jonah's feet. What are you wearing? Other boots. Adults can own more than one pair. They were half a size too large, but the soles gripped and the leather bent where feet actually bent. Owen left his expensive boots behind the seat. At the store, the broken sash waited beneath the lamp. Ruth had laid out a stiff brush, a narrow scraper, and 2 pieces of scrap pine. Practice, she said. Owen spent the morning removing glue from scrap joints. The first one he gouged. Ruth drew a pencil circle around the damage and made him keep working around it, so the mistake remained visible. Why not sand it out, he asked. Because then you'll learn that every error can be made invisible by removing more. On the second joint, he worked slowly enough that Ed passed twice and asked whether time had stopped. By the third, Owen could feel the scraper change when it moved from glue to wood. Ruth gave him the sash. The old adhesive came away in flakes and stubborn brown smears. Owen cleaned one side, turned it beneath the lamp, and found a line of pencil inside the joint. RB, right front, rain again. He ran his thumb beside the writing without touching it. Ruth saw. Your mother labeled everything. She complained when I did that in the refrigerator. What did you label? Leftovers. Dates, names, whether she'd eaten from the container. Cancer. Owen nodded. Ruth did not soften her voice, which kept him from doing something humiliating. She probably complained because she knew where you got it, she said. The bell above the door rang at 11. Silas entered carrying a rectangular wooden case scarred with age. He said nothing to Owen. He bought 2 drill bits, a packet of brass screws, and a bottle of linseed oil. On his way out, he stopped beside the workbench. Owen kept scraping. Silas picked up one practice joint. You cut this? Yes. Badly. That was the first. Silas examined the second. Also badly. I'm on the window now. I see that. Ruth watched from the register without pretending not to. Silas bent close to the cleaned joint. You rounded the inside shoulder. Owen looked. The corner seemed square. Where? Silas pointed with one thick fingernail. There. Light passes. Owen tilted the wood toward the lamp. A bright hairline appeared between the metal square and the shoulder. How do I fix it? You don't. You fit the patch to what remains. I thought the pieces had to match. They have to meet. Matching is what people say when they want the work to look easy. Silas put down the sash and left. Ruth waited until his truck pulled away. He brought that case to show you. What is it? Joinery planes. He didn't open it. He wanted you to ask. You told me not to reach before I look. Silas didn't. Owen stared through the window at the departing truck. This town has exhausting rules. Most are Silas-specific. By closing, Owen had fitted the missing wedge from a piece of old pine Ruth found in the store basement. The grain was not perfect, but it followed the original closely. He spread glue across the joint, fitted the rail, and tightened 2 clamps. "How long?" he asked. "Overnight. Then tomorrow I reset the peg. If the frame's square..." He checked it a 3rd time. Ruth pulled off her apron. It won't improve by intimidation. Lenora had sent word that the 3rd booth was available for surgery. Jonah drove Owen to the diner, where a chicken pot pie waited beneath an overturned bowl to keep warm. "This is becoming suspicious," Owen said. Lenora pushed a fork toward him. "Eat." The booth still wobbles. "I'm supposed to earn this first. You think I want a hungry man learning glue beneath my customers?" There were only 4 diners left, all adults with work-worn faces and coffee cups. Lenora refilled without asking. Each glanced at Owen. None approached him until a man in a delivery uniform stopped on his way out. "Your mother rebuilt my porch steps," he said. Owen swallowed. "Apparently she rebuilt most of the county." The man smiled. "She charged me double." That surprised a laugh out of Owen. "Caught me pretending I couldn't afford oak," the man said. "Told me dishonesty carried a materials surcharge." After he left, Lenora pulled the 3rd booth away from the wall. Its tabletop rocked on the base. Owen crouched and found one corner shimmed with folded cardboard. "Who did this?" "I did." "You could have told me. I wanted to see if you'd insult the repair before knowing whose it was." "Is that another town rule?" "No, that's entertainment." The problem was not the table at all. One floorboard beneath it had worn lower than the others. Owen replaced the cardboard with a tapered wood shim. Jonah showed him how to cut. The counter stools were harder. Their stretchers had loosened, and somebody had driven screws through 2 joints. Owen had to back the screws out, clean the holes, and glue in narrow dowels before the original joints could be restored. He finished one stool near 10. Lenora sat on it, shifted her weight, and bounced twice. "That's terrifying," Owen said. "If it fails under me, you learn faster." The stool held. She paid him $20 and wrapped the remaining pot pie in foil. When he protested, she added a slice of apple pie. "Deconstructed?" he asked. "Get out." Jonah was rewiring a light over the back counter. He drove Owen home after, refusing gas money. At the cabin, the battery lantern cast a small circle over the workbench. Owen placed the $20 beside his list. With Ruth's wages, Mason's gas money, and what remained in his account, he could survive for a few days. The roof might require more money than he could earn in months. His phone showed a missed call from Grant. No message. Another photograph waited from Claire. This one showed 6 sketches spread across the archive table. Chairs, a sideboard, a narrow desk, all bearing the bell. Beneath them she had written, "I don't know what to do with this." Owen typed, "Tell the truth." He watched the message deliver. Claire's answer came a minute later. To who, and which one? Owen typed, "Start with Dad." Claire called immediately. "You think I haven't considered that?" "I think you asked me because you don't like the answer. I asked because this affects more than the 2 of us. It affected Mom. She's dead." The words came out sharp. Then Claire breathed his name as if she could pull them back. Owen stared at the lantern. A moth struck the plastic globe, circled, and struck it again. "Yes," he said. "That's why everybody gets to decide what she meant." "That isn't fair." "No, I meant what you said." "So did I." Claire moved somewhere quieter. A door closed, cutting off the sounds around her. "There are 43 drawings with the bell," she said. "Some are rough concepts. Some have dimensions and material notes. At least 11 resemble early Whitaker pieces." "Resemble. I'm not a furniture historian. You sell them. I sell current collections. Half these pieces were discontinued before I joined the company. Is the founder's table one of them?" The sketch looks close. "Claire." "Yes." Owen closed his eyes. Claire continued before he could speak. "But a sketch doesn't tell us who finalized the design, who built the production model, or whether Mom gave it to the company. Dad's handwriting is on some pages too. What does he write? Costs, supplier names, changes for manufacturing, not designs. Those things are part of design." It sounded like Grant, but it also sounded true. Owen hated that the 2 could coexist. "Ask him why her name disappeared," he said. "Will you come with me?" Owen looked around the cabin. The plywood darkened one wall. Damp crept along the floor near the fireplace. His entire inheritance fit inside the lantern's circle and smelled faintly of mice. "He disowned me yesterday. He said something horrible because you both kept pushing. He canceled my tuition." "I can fix tuition." With the shares Mom left you? Silence. Owen regretted that one too. Claire's voice cooled. If you want me to do this, stop punishing me for what she gave me. I don't want your money. That has never stopped money from being the thing you're angry about. I'm angry because you got her place in the company without knowing she had one. And you got the place where she made all this. Neither of them spoke. The cabin gave a long wooden creak, as if settling under the weight of the comparison. Claire said, Dad called you. I saw. Call him back. Did he ask you to tell me? No. He asked Mason where the anniversary photo team could shoot something that looked like an old workshop. Owen sat straighter. Did Mason tell him about the cabin? Dad already knows what it looks like. That's not what I asked. I don't know. Mason's been weird all day. Mason is weird every day. More strategic than usual. Owen looked at the carved bell above the bench. Don't give them the address, he said. It's company records, Owen, not a witness protection program. The cabin isn't company property. Neither are Mom's memories, but you're collecting those fast enough. She ended the call this time. The window sash came out of its clamps straight the next morning. Owen checked it against Ruth's metal square, found one corner off, loosened the clamp, and tried again. By noon, the frame sat true. Silas entered while Owen was resetting the old peg. He leaned one elbow on the back workbench and watched without greeting him. Owen had learned enough not to fill the silence. The peg stopped halfway. Owen adjusted the angle and tapped again. Stop, Silas said. Owen stopped. Why? You're shaving one side. I used the original hole. The rail moved when it split. Hole's not aligned. Owen examined the joint. If I pull the peg, I'll damage it. Yes. So, I make a new peg. Yes. From what? Silas's eyes flicked toward the bins of scrap wood beneath the bench. You tell me. Not pine? Why? Too soft. The old one's darker. Oak? Silas picked up the peg and handed it to him. Smell. Owen did. It smelled like wood. That is an unhelpful lesson. Hickory. You could have said hickory. You could have listened with more than your ears. Ruth, pricing garden gloves nearby, said, Silas believes knowledge must arrive through hardship, or it becomes gossip. Silas ignored her. My shop. 6 tomorrow. Owen looked up. Why? To discover whether being late is among your talents. Then Silas left. At 5:50 the following morning, Jonah dropped Owen at a low metal-roofed workshop beside an old apple orchard. The lights were already on. Silas stood at a bench sharpening a chisel. You're early, he said. You said 6. I'm aware of time. The workshop was cleaner than Grant's office. Hand planes lined one wall by size. Chisels stood in a rack, their wooden handles darkened from use. The scarred case Silas had carried into the hardware store lay open on the bench, holding small planes with blades no wider than Owen's thumb. Silas pointed toward a hickory offcut. Make the peg. Owen cut one too thin. Silas tossed it into a box labeled kindling. The second split because Owen followed the saw cut instead of the grain. Silas put that one in the same box. What happens if I use all your hickory? Owen asked. You leave poorer. You could tell me what I'm doing wrong before I do it. I did. When? I placed the froe beside you. Owen looked at the heavy blade-like tool he had assumed was a kind of chisel. Silas showed him how to split the wood along its grain, then shaved the blank with a draw knife. His hands were large and stiff at the knuckles, but the tool moved as if attached to his wrists. The peg emerged in a dozen economical strokes. Owen's took an hour. Silas rolled it across the bench. It wobbled. It goes in a hole, Owen said. It doesn't have to win a beauty contest. A crooked peg pushes unevenly. Uneven pressure splits the rail you just repaired. Owen made another. This one rolled straight. Silas put coffee on a hot plate and poured 2 cups without asking whether Owen wanted one. It was strong enough to taste structural. Where did Rowan get the cabin timber? Owen asked. North Slope. The property's North Slope? Bell land then. Hers now, apparently. Grant called it 12 acres if you count the slope nobody can stand on. That sounds like Grant. Land only exists to him if a chair can sit level. Could I use fallen timber for repairs? If it's sound and you can get it down. So, yes. So, maybe. Trees aren't lumber because they're lying down. Silas carried his coffee to the window. Rowan chose every trunk. White oak for the sills, pine for the frame, walnut where hands would touch. She said a house should use hardwood where people wear it down. Owen thought of the walnut counter at Lenora's, polished by years of elbows and coffee cups. Why did you stop speaking? Silas's back tightened. Ruth told me you did. Ruth sells other people's business cheaper than hardware. She said you called Mom a coward. Silas turned. The anger in his face was not directed entirely at Owen. Your mother knew what Grant was taking. What was he taking? Don't ask questions you've already decided how I should answer. I haven't. You have. You want me to call him a thief so you can be right without learning anything difficult. Owen set down his coffee. Did he steal her designs? Silas looked at the hickory shavings on the bench. No, he said finally. Not at first. That was all he would say. They fitted the new peg into the repaired sash. Silas made Owen drive it, then plane the protruding ends flush without touching the surrounding rail. The finished repair remained visible, a fine line through the corner, the new wedge slightly lighter than the old heart pine. I can stain it, Owen said. You can. You think I shouldn't. I think pretending old wood was never broken is a fool's use of stain. Silas wrapped the sash in a quilted moving blanket. Put it back before weather changes. At the cabin, Jonah helped Owen remove the plywood and reset the sash weights. The repaired window slid upward with 2 fingers. Owen opened and closed it 3 times. Careful, Jonah said. You'll wear out the novelty. A roofer named Walt Dobbins arrived after lunch in a white truck with ladders on both sides. He walked the roof, inspected the chimney, and made notes on a pad. He had helped place the tarp 6 years earlier and seemed offended that it had failed, as if plastic owed him loyalty. Cedar replacement, $8,000 if the sheathing's sound, Walt said. More if it isn't. Owen stared at him. Asphalt would be under 4, Walt added. Wouldn't look the same. Would it work? A sound asphalt roof beats a romantic leak. Silas, standing by the porch, surprised Owen by nodding. The road needs gravel before I bring a trailer up, Walt said, and I'm booked 3 weeks. Owen had earned $247 since arriving, not counting Mason's money. It had felt like progress until Walt spoke. Can I do tear-off labor? You can if you're insured under somebody who knows roofs. I can learn. Walt scratched his jaw. Ruth says you work. That's not the same as knowing how. What would lower the price? Materials lower the price. Labor lowers the price. Whether not finding 3 more problems lowers the price. The answers had begun to sound familiar. A black Whitaker House SUV turned onto the cabin road and stopped at the first washout. Mason climbed out wearing loafers, dark slacks, and an expression of personal betrayal toward the mud. Silas saw the company logo and left without goodbye. Mason picked his way uphill carrying a leather folder under his arm. His gaze moved over the cabin, the repaired window, the ladder, and Owen's borrowed boots. You're actually living here, he said. That sounded more insulting in your head, didn't it? It sounded less damp. Mason stepped inside. He stopped beneath the carved bell. Then he saw the workbench. For once, he had no joke ready. Owen looked at the leather folder. What does Dad want? Mason kept staring at the faded measurements on the wall. He wants photographs, he said. For the anniversary campaign. Yes. No. You haven't heard the offer. I've heard the story. Mason opened the folder. Inside was a location agreement and a check made out to Owen for $15,000. Then you know, Mason said quietly, why they can't shoot it without you. Owen did not touch the check. Who is they? Brand team. Agency. Dad. Pick a pronoun. And you? Mason closed the folder halfway. I drove 2 hours in shoes that cost more than your electrical panel. I'd like partial credit for effort. You warned me not to send pictures. I warned you not to send them for free. Owen looked at the check again. $15,000. Enough for Cedar if Walt's estimate held. Enough to get power into the main room. Perhaps enough for gravel so the people doing the work could reach it without burying their trucks. Outside, Walt folded his ladder and slid it onto the rack. He glanced through the door, saw the check, and busied himself with a strap that did not appear to need attention. What exactly do they want? Owen asked. Mason opened the folder and removed several glossy pages. The first showed color samples. Weathered brown, charcoal, amber. A photograph of a hand plane. A close view of wood shavings curling from a bench. At the center was a paragraph in oversized type. Before Whitaker House was a name, it was one man, one set of tools, and one uncompromising vision. Owen read it twice. Mason set down the next page. It showed Grant at 30, sleeves rolled, standing beside an early dining chair. Rowan appeared in the background, out of focus, carrying 2 coffee cups. "They want to put him here," Owen said. "Not forever. 6 hours, 8 with setup." Standing at her bench, "They don't know it was her bench. You do. I know it now. And Dad always knew." Mason glanced at the carved bell. "Dad knows a lot of things in versions. That sounds like an excuse Claire would make. Claire thinks reasons and excuses are different species. I think they breed." Owen turned another page. The proposed photographs included Grant in the doorway, Grant touching an old beam, Grant seated at the workbench beneath a hanging light the agency would bring. One sketch placed 2 unfinished chairs behind him, as if they had been waiting there for 3 decades. They want to fake a workshop inside the real workshop. It's advertising. It's her life. It can be both. No. Mason slid the check closer. "That roof is held on with tape. Battens. Great. Battens and confidence. Walt quoted me under 8 for cedar. Then this pays the roof and leaves 7. I can subtract, can you? Because from where I'm standing, you have exactly one option that puts a safe roof over your head before winter. And you're treating it like a moral riddle. Change the copy." "I don't write copy. You manage regional accounts. Manage something." Mason's jaw tightened. "You think everybody at the company sits around polishing Dad's lies. 400 people work there, Owen. Sales staff, finishers, warehouse crews, people with mortgages. The anniversary campaign is booked with retailers in 9 states. You don't throw a brick through that because Ruth whoever told you Mom used a saw. Ruth Calder. Wonderful. I'll send her a fruit basket." Claire found 43 drawings. Mason looked toward the door. Owen watched him. "You knew?" "I knew Claire found drawings. She called me after she called you." "What did she say?" "That you were both being impossible," which narrowed nothing. "Did she send you the pictures?" "One." "The table?" Mason did not answer. Owen pulled the founder's table image from the campaign packet. It was a current photograph of the production model, the dark walnut surface glowing beneath studio lights. "Mom drew this at that bench. An early version. You sound like Claire." "Claire sounds like the company attorney, so everybody assumes she knows what she's doing. There's no attorney in the room. There's no designer either. That's the problem." Mason's voice broke slightly on the last sentence. He turned away and examined the fireplace. For years, Owen had believed his brother inherited Grant's certainty. Mason moved through meetings, restaurants, and family fights as if every room had been arranged for his entrance. Now he looked stranded between the damp stones and the collapsed washroom door. "You didn't know," Owen said. "Did you?" "No." "Then stop looking at me like I helped bury her in the archive. You worked there. So did she. That doesn't make it right. It makes it complicated." Walt came to the doorway. "I'll send Ruth the written estimate. Send it to me," Owen said. "You have email?" "Yes." "Address?" Owen gave it to him. Walt nodded toward the roof. "Weather says hard rain this afternoon. Tarp should hold if the wind stays down. What if it doesn't? Then you'll own more buckets." He drove away. Mason stepped onto the porch and watched the truck navigate the ruts. "You need the road graded. I know. You need drainage along the uphill side. I know. You can't live here. I am living here. No, you're sleeping here while other people keep you from dying." Owen folded the campaign pages and put them back in the leather folder. "You came to buy pictures. Don't pretend this is concern. I put $80 in your car. That doesn't make you good. I know." Mason's answer was immediate. It made sure you had gas. The first drops of rain tapped against the tarp. Mason shoved the check into the folder. "What would make you say yes?" "Credit Mom. How? The truth. Rowan Bell designed the original pieces in the cabin she built." "Every piece?" "The ones she designed." "Which ones are those?" Claire found 43 drawings. Drawings aren't production records. Then say she was co-founder. Mason rubbed both hands over his face. "You're asking Dad to tell the world his self-made story isn't self-made? It wasn't. No self-made story is. That's why people like them." Rain moved across the roof in a sudden rush. Water struck the tarp, pooled somewhere overhead, then poured from one corner onto the porch. Mason watched it. Mom approved the company biography. "Did you ever ask her?" "I heard her introduce herself at 100 events." "As what?" Mason's gaze stayed on the rain. Grant's wife? She was your mother. Did she look happy saying it? She looked tired, saying everything. Owen flinched. Mason saw. You don't own the fact that she was sick. I never said I did. You act like you were the only one close enough to know her. I stayed away from the hospital because she told me to. Every time I visited, she spent the next hour trying to make me feel better. I thought not going was one less job for her. She asked for you. When? Owen opened his mouth. There had been moments Rowan asked where Mason was. There had also been mornings she made Owen promise not to call either sibling because she did not want them seeing her unable to stand. Both truths waited, and neither was kind. Sometimes, he said. Mason nodded, looking almost relieved to be heard accurately. A hard gust struck the cabin. The tarp snapped once, then again. Something scraped across the shingles. Owen ran outside. The upper batten had torn loose at one end. It swung above the roof, held by a single nail. Wind drove rain beneath the lifted tarp. Ladder, Owen said. Absolutely not. Water's getting in. Walt said stay off. If the wind, Owen pulled the extension ladder from beneath the porch. Mason grabbed the other end. You don't know what you're doing, Mason said. I know where the rafters are. That is not enough information to die with. Then hold the ladder. They set it against the eave. Mason planted his loafers in the mud and slid half a foot. Those are worse than mine, Owen said. I came for corporate extortion. Nobody mentioned weather. Owen tied the hammer and waterproof tape into the bucket. He climbed. The roof flexed beneath his hands. Rain blurred the shingles and wind flattened his jacket against his back. He stayed over the rafter line, crawling toward the loose board. Below, Mason braced the ladder and shouted, If you fall, I'm telling Dad you joined a cult. You work for him. I recognize cults. Owen reached the batten. The tarp whipped hard enough to sting his wrist. He caught it, pressed it flat, and drove one nail. The rotten sheathing beneath gave way. The nail sank without holding. The tarp tore free another foot. Owen! Mason shouted. I'm fine. That's what idiots say from roofs. Water ran beneath Owen's sleeve. He shifted sideways toward sound wood, but the shingle under his knee split. His leg dropped through to the thigh. The roof caught him at the hips. For one blind second, he smelled wet pine and cold attic dust. Then Mason was on the ladder, one hand gripping Owen's boot. I have you, Mason said. You're supposed to hold the ladder. I contain multitudes. Owen pushed against the roof and pulled his leg free. The hole beneath him showed darkness and the edge of a decayed board. They retreated. By the time they reached the ground, both were soaked. Mason had lost one shoe in the mud. He stood in one sock, staring up at the flapping tarp. That, he said, breathless, was the dumbest thing I've ever seen you do. I've known you 20 years. The competition's strong. A crash sounded inside. They ran in. Water poured through the new hole onto the workbench. Mason seized the campaign folder. Owen moved the lantern and the carpenter's pencil, then grabbed the first containers he could find. The roof bucket, a stock pot, the wash basin from beneath the cot. The bucket filled fastest. Mason climbed onto the bench and pressed a piece of spare plastic against the underside of the hole, while Owen wedged a board beneath it. The solution was ugly, but it redirected most of the water into the pot. They stood shoulder to shoulder, dripping onto the floor. Mason looked up at the carved bell. Rainwater traced the wall a few inches away from it. She worked here, he said. Yes, not just once. No. Mason touched one of the penciled measurements beneath the bench. This is her handwriting. Owen waited. Mason climbed down and picked up the leather folder. The check inside had stayed dry. If I change the credit language, he said, I lose Dad. You're his son. That didn't protect you. The rain drummed around them. Owen thought of Grant kneeling on the dining room floor, scrubbing away mud nobody else could see. Don't buy the cabin with her erasure, he said. I'm trying to buy you a roof. Then help me tell the truth. Mason laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You make that sound cheaper. He tore the check in half. Owen stared at him. Mason tore it again, dropped the pieces onto the campaign folder, and tucked the folder under his arm. That offer was authorized for the story, as written, he said. I can't promise another one. I didn't ask you to do that, I know. It was becoming unbearable. He limped to the door with one muddy shoe in his hand. At the porch, he looked back at the cabin, then at Owen. I'll tell them the location refused, Mason said. The location? Mason's mouth twisted. The owner's exhausting. He crossed the yard toward the SUV, stepping carefully in his wet sock. Owen watched him go, then emptied the overflowing bucket. When he returned it beneath the leak, the water had already begun rising again. The bucket overflowed at 2:17 in the morning. Owen woke to water spreading beneath the cot. The rain had shifted, finding a path along one of the ceiling beams and dripping from the loft ladder. He emptied the bucket through the broken washroom, moved the cot, and wedged another pot beneath the new leak. His phone showed 1 bar. He called Jonah. The call dropped before Jonah answered. Owen tried again, standing near the repaired window with the phone raised over his head. "Owen? I have a hole." That sounds philosophical. "In the roof. I'm coming. You can't get up the road. Then I'll walk. I only called to ask what I should do. Stay off the roof. I know that now." Jonah arrived 35 minutes later, wearing a yellow rain suit and carrying a roll of plastic under one arm. Ruth followed him, hood up, with a toolbox in each hand. Owen opened the door. "Why is she here?" "I enjoy weather," Ruth said. "I called you, not her." "You called my nephew after 2 in the morning. That is how you call me." She stepped inside and saw the water running down the wall. Her eyes went to the carved bell, then the workbench, then the pots. "No electrical fire," Jonah said, "still our brightest point." They stretched plastic beneath the roof hole and made a funnel into the largest bucket. Jonah screwed narrow boards across 2 rafters while Owen held the lantern. Ruth moved the boxes from the workbench to the loft and covered them. "Where's the carpenter's pencil?" she asked. Owen pointed. It rested in the dry kitchen drawer. Ruth nodded once. Wind pressed against the cabin hard enough to make the temporary plastic breathe inward. A truck engine labored somewhere below. Headlights moved between the trees, stopped, then continued on foot. The door opened without a knock. Silas entered carrying 2 roof jacks, a coil of rope, and the expression of a man who had expected exactly this disaster from the beginning. "You called him?" Owen asked Ruth. "I called Walt. Walt called Silas. Bellwether has too many telephones." Silas dropped the rope beside the fireplace. "Where did your leg go through?" "Above the workbench toward the front. Rafter? Held. Sheathing didn't." "Did you put your hand on the chimney?" "No." Silas glanced at Ruth. "Some instruction survives." He climbed into the loft and inspected the underside of the roof with Jonah. Owen heard them discussing rafters, rotten boards, and the direction water had traveled. The words meant more to him now than they had 2 days earlier, but not enough. "What can I do?" he called. Silas's face appeared over the loft edge. "Empty buckets. I can help brace." "You can empty buckets before they ruin the floor." Owen wanted to argue. Then the pot beside the fireplace spilled over his boot. For the rest of the night, he carried water. Ruth brewed coffee on his camp stove. Jonah reinforced the plastic funnel. Silas pushed narrow metal sheets beneath the shingles from inside, reducing the worst stream to a steady drip. Nobody pretended they were repairing the roof. They were only persuading the rain to choose less destructive routes. Near dawn, the storm moved east. The hard drumming softened, then stopped. Water continued falling from the trees long after the sky cleared. Silas climbed onto the roof when there was enough light. He installed the jacks across the safe rafters and tied himself off to the sycamore. "Should that rope be around the tree?" Owen asked. "It's held the hill longer than you have." Walt arrived with plywood sheathing, 3 bundles of mismatched asphalt shingles, and a blue tarp thicker than the old one. 1 bundle was gray, 1 black, and 1 the color of dried moss. "Temporary," he said, before Owen could ask. "How temporary?" "Depends whether appearance offends you more than rain. Rain's ahead." They removed a section of damaged roofing around the hole. Owen worked from the ground, hauling broken shingles to a pile, and cutting pieces of plywood to measurements Jonah called down. His first cut wandered. Silas used it for a smaller patch and handed him another sheet. "Guide the saw," Silas said. "Don't wrestle it." Ruth returned from town with Ed, 2 more ladders, and 6 breakfast sandwiches. Lenora arrived behind them carrying a stainless steel coffee dispenser and enough towels to supply a motel. Owen looked at the people crossing his yard. "I can't pay everybody." Lenora handed him a sandwich. "Then we're lucky nobody sent an invoice. I'm serious." "So are we." Ruth opened a small spiral notebook. "Walt's charging material at cost and 6 hours labor. Jonah gets your labor on the store shelves and his shop inventory. Ed needs his shed roof scraped and painted before cold weather. Lenora has 3 more stools. 2, Lenora said. 1 died with dignity this morning. Ruth crossed something out. 2 stools. I'm paying today's work at the store rate and putting it toward materials. Owen stared at the notebook. You made a ledger. I own a business. This is still charity with arithmetic. Silas called down from the roof. Rowan would hit you with a board for saying that. Owen looked up. She's not here. The yard went quiet except for Walt's hammer. Silas rested both hands on the roof ridge. No, she isn't. So stop using her absence to make every offer suspicious. Ruth closed the notebook. You owe work. They owe work. Some differences settle in cash. Some in hours. That's how people manage before companies turn tables into origin stories. Owen took the notebook. Every name had a column. The figures were ordinary. 6 hours, $32, 2 meals, fuel. No one had forgiven him the cost of materials. No one had asked him to perform gratitude either. What if my hours aren't worth theirs? They aren't yet, Ruth said. That's why we write down the kind of work. Ed bit into his sandwich. I'm charging double if he talks while painting. By afternoon, the hole was closed. The patchwork shingles looked ridiculous against the cedar roof, like 3 sample cards laid across an old coat, but water could no longer reach the workbench. Walt handed Owen a materials receipt for $812. Owen's stomach tightened. I can give you $200 now. Give Ruth $50 for the store account. Rest goes on the ledger. How long do I have? Walt shrugged. How long do you plan to be honest? That isn't a date. It is around here. Silas climbed down last. Mud streaked his knees, and his hands trembled slightly as he untied the rope. He caught Owen noticing. Cold, Silas said. Owen nodded, though the sun was warm enough that Jonah had removed his jacket. The temporary roof changed the cabin's sound. That night, when a light shower crossed the ridge, drops struck asphalt instead of plastic. Owen lay on the cot waiting for the leaks. None came. He slept for 6 hours without waking. The ledger gave his days a shape. Mornings at Calder Sun paid cash or reduced material costs. Afternoons went to whatever name Ruth had circled, scraping Ed's shed, moving lumber for Walt, tightening tables at Lenora's. Jonah taught him to distinguish electrical cable by gauge, while Owen rebuilt shelves in Jonah's workshop. In return, Jonah began drawing a plan for a safe circuit serving the cabin's main room and kitchen. You can have 2 outlets, Jonah said. Maybe 3 if you stop asking for luxury. A refrigerator is luxury? At your current income, refrigeration is a personality flaw. Silas never announced lessons. He appeared at the cabin, pointed to a problem, and waited to see whether Owen understood. Together they removed the rotten floor beside the fireplace. The sill beneath was damaged at one end, but sound farther along. Owen cut away too much on his first attempt. Silas stared at the notch. I know, Owen said. What do you know? That I crossed the line. Why? I thought the rot went farther. You thought or you tested? Owen did not answer. Silas handed him an awl. Rot yields. Stain lies. Learn the difference? The mistake cost them an extra length of oak. Owen added it to the ledger himself. At Lenora's, people began bringing small repairs when they heard Rowan Bell's son was working out of the cabin. Owen corrected them every time. Ruth is teaching me. Silas is teaching me. Jonah did the wiring. The corrections did little. A loose chair arrived, then a table leaf that would not close, then a cabinet door with a hinge somebody had repaired using a roofing screw. Owen took only what Ruth said he could handle. He learned to quote hours and materials separately. He learned that customers lied about having spilled water and told the truth about damage caused by anger. He learned that old furniture held smells, smoke, lemon polish, damp basements, perfume caught in drawers. The money remained small. The work did not. Claire's gray sedan appeared at the foot of the cabin road, while Owen and Jonah were spreading gravel into the worst ruts. She stopped before the washout and got out in heeled boots. Jonah leaned on his shovel. Family footwear issue? It's genetic, Owen said. Claire carried a flat black portfolio. Her trousers were too fine for the road, and her expression suggested she had spent the drive rehearsing something that no longer fit the place. You didn't say you were coming. You don't answer consistently. Phone service doesn't answer consistently. Jonah offered her his spare rubber boots from the truck. She looked at them. They're clean, he said, emotionally. She put them on. At the cabin, Claire stood on the restored section of porch and took in the patchwork roof, the open front window, and the new oak beside the fireplace. She touched the repaired sash where Owen's wedge remained visible. "You did this?" "With supervision." "Who broke it?" "With independence." Her laugh sounded like Rowan's for half a second. Owen looked away before Claire could see his face. She entered. The workbench stopped her. Mason had gone quiet there. Claire did something stranger. She set down the portfolio, placed both palms on the worn walnut surface, and closed her eyes. "I remember this," she said. "You've been here?" "No." "The edge." Her fingers moved beneath the front lip. Mom's kitchen work table had the same curve. She used to stand there when she couldn't sleep. Owen ran his hand along it. He had not noticed that the lower edge softened toward the center, exactly where a person's palms would rest. Claire opened the portfolio. She had brought high-resolution copies of the archive sketches, production photographs, and 3 early catalogs. On the first catalog, Grant stood beside the founder's table. The caption called it his breakthrough design. Claire placed Rowan's original sketch beside it. The proportions matched. So did a small correction at the base of the right leg. "Dad's notes are on the back," she said. He changed the width for factory cutting and replaced the hand joint with hardware. He adapted it for production. Yes. But she designed it. Claire looked around the cabin, at the pencil marks on the wall and the bell above the bench. "Yes," she said. The words seemed to cost her breath. "Did you ask him?" "I didn't have to. He came into the archive room and saw what I was doing." "What did he say?" "That families don't survive if every private compromise becomes public property." Owen felt anger rise, clean and immediate. "That's not an answer." "No." Claire met his eyes, but he knew exactly which compromise I meant. She removed one final sheet from the portfolio, the approved anniversary speech with Grant's name printed at the top. "What is this?" "The truth he plans to tell," Claire said, "unless one of us stops him." Owen read the first page. Grant's speech began with an empty workshop and a single chair. He described buying salvaged walnut with the last money in his account, working through the night, and waking Rowan to show her the finished piece. The language was polished, but the story sounded like Grant because Owen had heard pieces of it for years. One man, one vision, one woman who believed in him before anyone else did. Rowan appeared in the 4th paragraph. "My wife gave our work its warmth and our home its purpose." "Our work," Owen said. "That's new. Marketing added it after Mason came back." "Does Dad know?" He approved the revision. Owen kept reading. Grant would stand beneath projected photographs of the early collections, several of which matched the sketches spread across Rowan's workbench. He would thank Claire and Mason for carrying the company forward. Owen's name did not appear. That did not surprise him. The relief did. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Claire pulled off Jonah's rubber boots and left them neatly beside the door. "I don't know. You drove 2 hours with his speech. I wanted you to read it. Why?" "Because every time I read it alone, I hear different lies." Owen looked at her. Claire tapped the opening paragraph. "Dad did buy the walnut. I found the invoice. He did build the first production chair, from Mom's drawing. Yes, he worked through the night. He probably did. That part sounds like him. And she believed in him." Claire sat on the cot. "She did. That's what makes this harder than if he simply stole a stack of drawings." On the workbench, the catalogs and sketches shared the same afternoon light. Grant's photographs were clean, confident, and arranged to look inevitable. Rowan's drawings were crowded with revisions. She had erased so hard in places that the paper had thinned. "He turned what she made into a company," Claire said. That mattered. She couldn't have employed 400 people from this cabin, and he couldn't have sold furniture she never designed. "I know. Do you?" Claire flinched. "You don't have to say everything like, you're the last honest person alive." Owen set down the speech. "What does stopping him look like? I could alter the slides, add her sketches, change my introduction. Will he let you?" "No." "Then you're asking whether you should do it anyway." Claire stood and walked to the repaired window. "He'll say I'm humiliating him while he's grieving. He'll be right about one part. I'm grieving too. That doesn't make the speech true. No, it makes me tired." Outside, Jonah drove the shovel into the gravel and waved toward the porch. Silas's red truck was climbing the road. Silas carried the old rectangular tool case from his shop. When he entered and saw Claire, he He stopped. She turned. For a long moment, the resemblance moved between them in ways Owen could not name. Claire had Grant's posture and Rowan's mouth. Silas seemed to recognize both. "You're the daughter," he said. "Claire, Silas Bell. I know now. That puts you ahead of yesterday." His gaze settled on the archive copies. He crossed to the workbench and examined the founder's table sketch. "Your mother drew this after Lenora complained the first table caught her stockings on the stretcher." Claire looked up. "You remember the drawing?" "I remember Lenora using language that blistered paint." "Did Mom build the original here?" "Yes." "Did Dad work on it?" Silas removed his coat. He sanded the top. Owen almost laughed, but Silas's expression stopped him. "Grant hated sanding," Silas continued. "Said it was work that erased itself." Rowan told him that was why it mattered. Claire touched the copy. "Who designed the joint?" "Rowan." "Who changed it for production?" "Grant, probably." She cursed the metal brackets in the catalog. "She saw the catalog?" Silas's mouth tightened. "Everyone?" Claire pressed both hands to the workbench. "Then, why didn't she say anything?" "She did." "To who?" "Grant, me, Ruth. Anybody except the customers paying him." "Why?" Silas looked toward the door. Jonah had stopped shoveling and moved out of earshot. "Because by then the company paid their mortgage," Silas said. "Then it paid other people's mortgages. Then every objection she made became a threat to something larger than herself. Dad says she chose to step away. She chose something. I was too proud to ask which parts were choice and which were exhaustion." Silas opened the wooden case. Inside lay a steel framing square, darkened with age, its markings worn thin near the heel. One arm bore the outline of a bell scratched into the metal. He lifted it out. "Rowan left this with me the last time she came to my shop." "When?" Owen asked. "After the company's first national catalog. Grant's picture was on the cover. Her table was inside." Silas placed the square on the bench. "I told her if she let him put his name on her work, she deserved to lose it." Claire inhaled. Owen remembered Ruth's warning about people who confused cruelty with honesty. "What did she say?" he asked. Silas ran a thumb over the engraved bell. "She said survival inside a marriage could look like cowardice from the outside." The words settled into the cabin's quiet. "She walked out," Silas continued. "I waited for her to come back because I was right. Being right kept me warm for about a week. Then it kept me alone for 23 years. "Why didn't you call her?" Claire asked. "Same reason Grant won't change that speech." Silas shut the empty case. "Pride likes to wear a principal's coat." He pushed the framing square toward Owen. "It's yours." "No," Owen said. "She left it with you." "She left it because I made using it painful. That doesn't mean she wanted me to have it. It means I've held it long enough." Owen picked up the square. It was heavier than Jonah's aluminum one and cold despite the warm room. A shallow dent marked one edge. The bell had been scratched by hand, one line slightly crooked. Claire touched the steel with 2 fingers. The sound of an engine came from below. A black SUV moved carefully along the new gravel and stopped beside Jonah's truck. Claire closed her eyes. "I told him I was coming." "You invited him?" "No." "I stopped lying when he asked where." Grant climbed out wearing a charcoal coat. He surveyed the road, the temporary roof, and the stacked rotten boards beside the porch. His gaze paused on Jonah, who leaned on his shovel without greeting him. Owen placed Rowan's square on the workbench. Grant entered the cabin. He did not look around like Mason or Claire. He looked directly at the bell carved into the wall. "You repaired the window," he said. "I broke it first." "That sounds expensive, mostly embarrassing." Grant glanced toward the new oak beside the fireplace. "Silas did this?" "He showed me." "Of course he did." Silas picked up his coat. "You still hold a hammer like it's a microphone?" Grant's face remained still. "You still mistake bitterness for craftsmanship?" "Dad," Claire said. Silas put on his coat. "I'll be outside." As he passed Grant, neither man made room. Their shoulders struck lightly. Silas continued down the steps. Grant removed his gloves 1 finger at a time. "Claire tells me you've decided the anniversary event requires a public correction." "I said the speech isn't true," she replied. "It is true. It is incomplete. Incomplete in exactly one direction." Grant's attention moved to the sketches. He picked up the copy of the founder's table, not touching the others. Your mother was never erased from Whitaker House. Show me her name in the catalog, Owen said. Grant looked at him. You have spent 2 weeks among people who resented her leaving and have mistaken their resentment for a complete history. They remembered what she built. So do I. Then why won't you say it? Grant placed the sketch down carefully. Because saying Rowan designed the early line is not what happens once that door opens. The headline becomes that I stole my dead wife's work. It becomes scandal. It becomes lawyers pretending marriage is a clean division of labor. Every private decision we made will be pulled apart by people who never knew us. You don't have to call yourself a thief, Owen said. I'm pleased to have your permission. Call her a founder. Grant's eyes flashed. I founded the company with her furniture, with my money, my suppliers, my factory, my sales. Rowan could make one beautiful table for a woman who paid in breakfasts. I made it possible to produce 5,000 without destroying the design. You changed the joint to hardware, Claire said, so a worker could assemble it safely and a customer could afford it. That doesn't make the drawing yours. I never said she didn't draw it. You let everyone believe you did. Grant turned on her. Your mother stood beside me at every launch as your wife. She chose that. Silas's earlier words seemed to remain in the room. Owen said, did she choose or did she survive the version of marriage you could tolerate? Grant went pale. Claire whispered, Owen. No, Grant said. Let him perform for his new audience. There is no audience. Grant gestured toward the open door, where Jonah and Silas were visible in the yard. There is always an audience in this town. He walked to the fireplace. His hand moved over the stone without touching it. She asked me to come here once, he said. After Claire joined the company, Rowan wanted to reopen the workshop, make pieces by hand again. I told her it was nostalgia, that she would tire of it in a month. Would she? Owen asked. Probably. Grant gave a small, painful smile. Your mother loved beginning things. Completion offended her. The criticism sounded affectionate because it was specific. Owen hated that too. She could spend 4 days shaping a table edge and leave the invoices unopened until the power company called, Grant said. I did not invent her weaknesses. No, Owen replied. You just made them the whole story. Grant's smile vanished. He removed an envelope from inside his coat and set it beside Rowan's framing square. This is not the campaign payment Mason destroyed. It is a private offer from me. $32,000 for the cabin and land. You can pay everyone, replace the roof, and finish your degree without depending on this place. You want to demolish it. I want the argument to stop living here. Claire stared at him. You told me you wanted it preserved for the brand archive. I changed my mind. After seeing the sketches? Grant did not answer. Owen opened the envelope. A cashier's check lay inside. $32,000. His name was spelled correctly. Grant had driven to a bank, arranged it, and carried the solution into the cabin, like something solid enough to end memory. Owen returned the check to the envelope. If Mom had sold you the first table, he said, would that have made you its builder? This is land, not a metaphor. It's both. That's why you're afraid of it. Grant's hand curled around one glove. Take the money. No, you cannot afford pride. I'm not keeping it to prove you wrong. Then why? Owen looked at the ledger, the mismatched roof, the repaired window, and Rowan's square. Because everything you call a wreck starts working when people stop deciding what it's worth before they touch it. Grant stood very still. Then he picked up the envelope. At the door, he turned to Claire. The anniversary speech remains as approved. Claire's face had gone calm. It was the expression she wore before silencing showroom managers. I understand, she said. Grant left. His SUV backed down the gravel without difficulty. Owen watched Claire watching it. What are you going to do? He asked. She folded the speech once, directly through Grant's opening line. I'm going to work, she said. Claire took off her coat. What are you doing? Owen asked. Working. She draped the coat over the cot, rolled the sleeves of Rowan's cream blouse to her elbows, and looked around the cabin. Tell me what needs doing. Everything. Choose one. Owen glanced toward the open floor beside the fireplace. They had fitted the replacement boards, but not finished them. The old surface had darkened unevenly around the new oak. Those need sanding. Claire looked at him. You gave me sanding because Dad hates it. I gave you sanding because I'm going outside to move gravel. That sounded more believable before you explained it. He showed her how to follow the grain and avoid rounding the board edges. She listened without interrupting, then took the sanding block and knelt. Her first strokes were too fast. "Slow down," Owen said. "I'm sanding wood, not negotiating peace. You're scratching it. It's a floor. It's a floor Silas spent a day fitting." Claire adjusted her pressure. Owen waited. "You can go," she said. "You're still pushing too hard. Get out." In the yard, Jonah had already spread half the new gravel. He watched through the doorway as Claire sanded. Family reunion going well? She hasn't thrown anything. Early. They worked the road until Owen's shoulders ached. Gravel made every shovel sound final, though the pile diminished with insulting slowness. After an hour, Claire came outside with dust in her hair and a thin red line across one palm. "You got a splinter," Owen said. "I noticed when the wood entered me." Jonah handed her tweezers from the truck's first aid kit. Claire pulled out the splinter, inspected it, and said a word Rowan had once used after dropping a roasting pan at Thanksgiving. Owen laughed. Claire did too. She leaned against the truck, holding the tweezers in one hand and her injured palm in the other, laughing until she had to wipe her eyes with the back of her wrist. It ended as quickly as it began. She hated sanding, Claire said. "Silas says Dad did. Mom hated it too. She made me sand a jewelry box once and told me to think of everyone who had annoyed me." "You made a jewelry box?" "No, she did. I sanded one side, got bored, and left. She finished it after I went home." "Where were you going?" "My apartment. I was 22. Owen tried to place the memory. Rowan had never mentioned the box. Claire looked down at her palm. "She asked me to come back the next weekend. I had a launch." "Which launch?" "The Mercer bedroom collection. The one with the curved drawer fronts." Claire nodded toward the cabin. "There's a sketch inside with a bell." They stood beside the gravel pile, listening to Jonah work farther down the road. "I thought she was trying to interfere," Claire said. "Every time I got more responsibility, she suddenly wanted me to do some small thing with her. Strip a chair, help choose fabric, drive out to an estate sale. I thought she was threatened by me being good at the company. Maybe she was." Claire gave him a wounded look. "People can love you and be threatened," Owen said. "Dad does it professionally." That earned a tired smile. Claire returned to the cabin and finished the floor. She did not announce her intentions for the anniversary event. She photographed Rowan's framing square, the workbench, and the penciled measurements on the wall, but not Owen. Before leaving, she placed the approved speech back into the portfolio. At the car, she hugged him with dusty arms. "Come Thursday," she said. "Dad won't want me there. It isn't his birthday party, it's his company. Our company." The words sounded different now. "I don't want to be used as evidence," Owen said. "I'm not asking you to speak." "What are you asking?" "For you to hear it in the room." He did not promise. Mason called Wednesday night while Owen was planing the edge of a replacement porch board. "Claire has become alarming," he said. "She's always alarming. She requested control of the event slides. Then she asked production to pull one original from every early collection we still make. Did they? She owns shares and uses complete sentences. Of course they did." Owen held the phone against his shoulder and continued planing. A translucent curl of pine rose from the blade. "Does Dad know?" He knows she revised her introduction. He does not know what revision means, because she has stopped answering direct questions with anything but, "You'll see." "That does sound alarming. I asked for a copy, and she said to trust her judgment." "Did you?" "I checked whether she'd been replaced by an imposter." The plane caught at the end grain. Owen stopped and reset it. Mason lowered his voice. "Are you coming?" "I haven't decided. That means no in your dialect. I don't want Claire turning Mom into a weapon. Claire doesn't use weapons. She uses documentation. Same result if you aim it at Dad. Maybe he should stop standing where the facts are pointed." Owen set down the plane. Mason rarely risks sincerity without burying it under two jokes. "You think she should do it?" "I think I carried a check into Mom's workshop so Dad could be photographed pretending it was his. I'm not enjoying the alternative view of myself. You tore it up after I brought it." "Mason, there's a pass for you at the front desk. Don't wear the boots from the campaign photo." "I don't own the boots from the campaign photo anymore." Tragic. "They made you look like a catalog model facing moderate adversity." Mason ended the call. Owen finished the porch board after midnight. Thursday afternoon, he showered at Jonah's apartment above the electrical shop, because the cabin still had no working washroom. He put on the navy sweater Rowan said made him look trustworthy, clean jeans, and the repaired work boots Jonah had stopped asking him to return. Ruth saw him leaving the store and adjusted his collar without permission. "You're not my mother?" he said. "No." Rowan would have fixed the loose thread instead of tucking it. She pulled a folding knife from her pocket and cut it. Jonah drove him to the flagship showroom, an hour and 40 minutes from Bellwether. Neither Ruth nor Jonah asked to attend. "This part belongs to you," Ruth had said. The showroom occupied a converted brick factory with tall windows and black steel beams. Owen had attended openings there before, usually assigned to carry coats, fetch missing cables, or keep Rowan company while Grant greeted people who mattered to the business. That evening, every early Whitaker collection occupied its own pool of light. The founder's table stood near the stage, set for dinner but bearing no plates. Large photographs of Grant's first factory covered the rear wall. Owen's pass waited at the desk. The employee who handed it to him hesitated over his name, then said, "I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you. And congratulations on the cabin." Owen looked at her. She flushed. Mason mentioned it. Did he mention the roof? No. Then he was being kind. The event filled slowly with retailers, longtime employees, suppliers, and local business reporters. Everyone was an adult, dressed as if furniture required formal respect. Servers circulated with wine. A jazz trio played near the upholstery displays. Owen stayed beside a row of discontinued chairs. Mason found him there wearing a dark suit and the expression of a man responsible for several disasters occurring in different rooms. "You came," Claire asked. "I also asked?" She used fewer insults. "That doesn't sound like us." Mason handed him a glass of sparkling water. "Dad knows you're here." "What did he say?" He looked at me for a long time. Terrifying. "I may not recover." Grant stood across the showroom, speaking with two buyers. He saw Owen. The conversation around him continued, but his smile disappeared. He did not approach. Claire took the stage at 7:15. She wore a black suit and Rowan's silver earrings. Her portfolio lay closed on a side table. The first slides were familiar. The original factory, the first delivery truck, Grant loading chairs by hand. Claire spoke about manufacturing, stubbornness, and the risk of starting a furniture company in a rented warehouse with equipment that overheated every afternoon. Grant relaxed slightly near the stage. Then the founder's table appeared on the screen. Not the catalog photograph. Rowan's drawing. The bell mark sat clearly in the lower corner. Claire looked toward Grant. "For most of my life, I understood this table as my father's first great design. That is the story printed in our catalog, displayed in our showroom, and repeated by me." The room quieted. Mason stood beside Owen, perfectly still. Claire continued. "My father did make it possible to produce this table at a scale its original designer could never have reached alone. He found suppliers, built a factory, redesigned the joint for manufacturing, and sold an idea that nobody in the industry had agreed to buy. Grant's face had emptied, but the original idea was not his." A second slide appeared. Rowan at the cabin workbench, younger than Owen remembered her, hair tied with a bandana, one hand resting on the unfinished table. The photograph must have come from Silas or Ruth. "My mother, Rowan Bell Whitaker, designed and built the original founder's table in a cabin she constructed outside Bellwether. She created many of the pieces that established the Whitaker house style. She was not only my father's wife, his muse, or the source of warmth in somebody else's vision." Claire's voice shook. She did not hide it. She was a carpenter. She was a designer. She was a founder of this company. No one applauded at first. The silence was not hostile. It was the sound of several hundred people rearranging a story while standing inside the result. Then an older finisher near the front began clapping. Another employee joined. The applause spread unevenly, gathering force until Claire had to stop speaking. Grant did not clap. Owen wished the applause felt better. Instead, he watched his father absorb it, each strike of hands removing something Grant had believed belonged to him alone. Claire raised one hand. "This correction is not an accusation that one person built Whitaker House alone. It is the opposite. Our history became easier to sell when we reduced it to one visionary man. The truth is that two gifted, difficult people built different parts of the same thing. One became famous for it, the other became a footnote." She looked at Owen, and the footnote built the table. The screen changed again. Photographs of Rowan's drawings appeared beside the finished pieces. Her bell mark repeated across the wall. Claire finished by announcing that the early collection records would be reviewed, that Rowan would be credited on the designs supported by the archive, and that the company's history would be corrected. Those promises were larger than a speech. Owen saw people in the front row exchange glances. He saw the head of marketing lower her phone and begin typing with both thumbs. Claire stepped away from the microphone. Grant was scheduled next. For a moment, Owen thought he would leave. Instead, Grant walked onto the stage. He kissed Claire's cheek. From a distance, the gesture looked tender. Owen saw Claire's shoulders stiffen. Grant stood at the lectern with the approved speech in his hand. "My daughter," he began, then stopped. He looked at Rowan's drawing behind him. "She did hate that metal bracket," he said. Laughter moved carefully through the room. Grant folded the speech. "Rowan said it made honest wood depend on a cheap piece of hardware. I said honest wood did not make a table affordable to somebody furnishing a first home." His voice remained steady, but his thumb worked along the paper's fold. "We had that argument for 31 years. He looked toward the founder's table. "Claire is right about who drew it." That was as close as Grant came to confession. He thanked the employees, the suppliers, and the customers. He spoke about the company's future without repeating the story of one man in an empty workshop. When he finished, the applause was respectful rather than triumphant. Backstage, the family gathered in a narrow room filled with spare chairs. Grant closed the door. "What you did," he said to Claire, "cannot be taken back. I know. You made commitments without consulting the executive team. I am part of the executive team. You embarrassed me in front of people who have trusted me for decades. I name Mom. You accuse me of erasing her. I said we erased her. Do not spread your guilt across the room and call it generosity." Claire recoiled. Mason stepped between them, not physically, but with his voice. "Dad." Grant turned. "You knew?" "I knew she changed the slides." "And did nothing. I tore up your check." Grant stared at him. Mason swallowed. "The cabin payment. I know which check." Grant looked toward Owen. "So, this is what you wanted?" "No. You stood out there while they applauded the idea that your mother survived me. The cabin isn't proof she didn't love you. Then what is it proof of? That she existed outside you." Grant's face twisted, not with anger, but with something less defended. Owen continued. "She built before you. She built with you. She gave things up and chose things and regretted things. Naming her doesn't make your marriage a fraud. It makes me a thief. Only if you keep refusing to give back the credit." Grant looked at all three of them. "You chose a dead woman's version over mine." Claire shook her head. "There shouldn't have been sides. There are now." Grant opened the door. No one tried to stop him. He crossed the showroom alone, passing beneath Rowan's bell, projected 3 stories high on the brick wall. For several seconds, nobody in the backstage room moved. Then Mason exhaled. "I think he just disowned all 3 of us." Claire pressed her fingers beneath her eyes without smearing her makeup. "You still have a job." That did not sound like reassurance. "He can't fire me tonight." Again, not reassuring. Outside the room, voices gathered near the door. Reporters wanted Claire. Employees wanted explanations. The head of marketing wanted to know whether she should publish Rowan's drawings or pretend the projector had been taken over by principled hackers. Claire straightened her jacket. Owen touched her arm. "You don't have to answer everything tonight. I made claims in front of 400 people. You told them what you know, and promised to determine the rest. That sounds like actual work." She gave him a tired smile. "Mom would say I started another drawer before closing the first." Mason picked up the approved speech Grant had left on a chair. "Mom would have set this on fire in a sink and denied it while holding the matches." "Mom didn't set things on fire," Claire said. "She burned Dad's first factory invoice. That was an accident. She framed the ashes." Claire's laugh turned into a sob. She covered her mouth. Mason reached her first. Owen stepped in a moment later, and the 3 of them stood locked together between stacked banquet chairs while somebody outside knocked and called Claire's name. It was not reconciliation. Too many sharp edges remained for that. But when Claire pulled away, she left one hand on Owen's shoulder and the other on Mason's. "I have to go back out," she said. Mason opened the door. "We're coming." Owen shook his head. "This is your company." Claire looked at him. It was her company, too. "I know. That's enough for tonight." He left through the loading entrance. Jonah waited in the truck with the heater running. He did not ask whether the event had gone well. The answer was already appearing on phones. Rowan's photograph glowed from the screen, mounted to the dashboard, captured beneath a headline that called her Whitaker House's Forgotten Founder. Owen turned the screen face down. Bad article? Jonah asked. Too fast. That's how truth travels once people discover it has a photograph. Owen looked through the windshield at the showroom's tall windows. Grant's silhouette crossed one of them and disappeared. Take me home, he said. The cabin was cold when he arrived, but dry. He lit the battery lantern, hung the navy sweater beside Claire's company jacket, and set Rowan's framing square against the wall above the workbench. For the first time, the silence did not feel empty. The anniversary announcement did not destroy Whitaker House. Orders did not evaporate. 400 employees did not lose their jobs because Claire named the woman who drew a table. Some retailers complained about changing printed materials. Others requested new display cards before the company had written them. 2 business reporters described Grant as a disgraced founder, which made Owen angry despite everything. One design magazine called Rowan a secret genius, which would have made her throw the issue across the room. Claire formed a small archive team and refused to let marketing write its conclusions in advance. They compared drawings, prototypes, catalogs, invoices, and production notes. Where the evidence supported Rowan, her name was added. Where the work had truly been shared, both names appeared. The founders' table became the Bell Whitaker table. Grant did not approve the change. He also did not stop it. He stopped answering Claire except in meetings. He spoke to Mason only about sales numbers. He did not call Owen at all. The company offered Owen nothing, and Owen asked for nothing. He returned to the cabin's 51 problems. The first permanent roof was asphalt. Silas grumbled about the loss of cedar until Owen asked whether he planned to contribute $6,000 to satisfy the roof's historical feelings. No, Silas said. Then black or gray? Black shows heat. Gray? Looks like a county office. Owen chose charcoal. He sold the expensive watch Grant had given him for finishing his first year of college. The money covered sheathing. His wages at Calder-Sun paid for shingles, hours scraping Ed's shed, moving materials for Walt, and rebuilding Lenora's stools reduced what he owed for labor and supplies. Walt put Owen on the ground crew during tear-off, then allowed him onto the safe section under direct supervision. It took 4 days. When they finished, the roof lacked the cabin's original grace, but the first rain struck it and stayed outside. Owen stood beneath the repaired ceiling listening. Silas joined him. Dry, Owen said. Silas looked upward. Ugly. Dry. Rowan would have chosen cedar. Rowan would have had more than $200. Silas considered that. Also true. Jonah wired the main room and kitchen. Owen drilled holes, pulled cable, labeled every run, and was forbidden to connect anything that could kill him. When the first outlet worked, he plugged in a small refrigerator Ruth had found at an estate sale. It rattled loud enough to frighten something beneath the porch. Luxury, Owen said. Personality flaw, Jonah replied. The washroom remained unusable, but the old hand pump produced clear water after they replaced its cracked leather seal and flushed the line. Owen rebuilt the porch one section at a time, preserving the soundboards and replacing only what failed beneath the awl. Repair work began occupying more of the bench. People brought chairs, cabinets, tables, and boxes of loose wooden parts they swore had once formed something valuable. Owen turned away jobs beyond his skill. Silas objected when he took too little money. Ruth objected when he took too long. Lenora objected as recreation. He kept a ledger on the wall. Cash, materials, hours, meals, fuel, knowledge. Nothing disappeared because somebody could not pay immediately. Nothing became free merely because money was absent. By the time the new porch steps were fitted, the cabin supported itself badly, but honestly. Grant arrived on a Tuesday morning in a clean SUV that no longer sank into the road. Owen was working on a warped cabinet door at the bench. He heard the engine stop, then watched his father sit behind the wheel for nearly a minute before getting out. Grant wore no tie. He carried nothing. He climbed the porch steps and tested the handrail automatically. Loose? Owen asked. No. Sounded disappointed. Surprised. Owen returned to the cabinet door. What do you want? Grant entered and looked around. Power tools occupied a shelf beside the original hand planes Silas had loaned Owen. The repaired window stood open. Rowan's square hung beneath the carved bell. A coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen corner, plugged into Jonah's third and supposedly unnecessary outlet. You chose asphalt, Grant said. I chose dry. Your mother would have argued for cedar. Silas said that. Silas enjoys speaking for people after making it impossible for them to speak to him. He knows. Grant's expression changed slightly. Did he tell you? Owen nodded. That sentence about surviving a marriage, Grant said. Rowan used it on me too. Owen stopped working. When? The night she came home from his shop. I said she had defended me. She said I had misunderstood. Grant moved toward the fireplace. The new oak floorboards were beginning to darken from use. I told myself she stayed because the life we built was worth the compromises, he said. When she complained, I counted everything the company had given us. I never counted what it kept taking from her. Why did you want the cabin demolished? Grant looked at the workbench. Because she made it before me. That's all? No? Owen waited. Grant rubbed one thumb against his palm. Because she could make it without me. The admission was quiet enough that the refrigerator nearly covered it. I was good at things Rowan hated, Grant continued. Money, scale, repetition, convincing people. For a long time, that made us partners. Then I began treating her dislike of those things as proof that my work mattered more. You let us believe she couldn't take care of herself. Toward the end, she couldn't. That's not the same thing. No. Grant's eyes moved to the framing square. I don't know how to apologize for 30 years without turning the apology into another speech about me. Then don't. Grant looked at him. Owen set the warped cabinet door between them. Its finish had clouded, and one corner curled away from the frame. Remove that, he said. The door, the finish. Grant examined the surface. With what? Owen laid out a scraper, gloves, and a jar of stripping gel. Grant picked up the scraper incorrectly. Not like that. I know how to hold a tool. You hold a hammer like a microphone. Grant stared at him. Silas, they said together. A laugh escaped Grant before he could stop it. The sound was rusty and brief. Owen showed him how to angle the blade. Grant pushed too hard, lifting a thin curl of wood with the finish. Stop! Grant stopped. You're cutting the veneer. How can you tell? The color changes. Grant bent closer. I don't see it. Move toward the window. He did. In the daylight, the damaged strip appeared pale against the walnut. Grant touched it with one finger. Can it be repaired? Yes. How much? Owen looked at him. Grant closed his eyes. What does the repair take? Patience. I was afraid of that. They worked for almost 2 hours. Grant did not ask whether Owen forgave him. Owen did not offer. When Grant left, half the cabinet door remained unfinished. You can come back Saturday, Owen said. Grant stood on the porch. To finish the door, Owen added. I understood. He returned Saturday, then the Saturday after that. He and Silas did not become friends. Their first shared hour in the cabin contained fewer than 20 words, 11 of them hostile. But Grant listened when Silas explained why Rowan had chosen walnut for the workbench edge, and Silas did not leave. The work trade supper happened after Owen finished the porch. Lenora brought pot roast, beans, and 2 apple pies she refused to describe as structurally sound. Ruth brought coffee. Ed carried folding chairs. Walt supplied firewood. Jonah strung warm lights beneath the eaves using the third outlet. Claire arrived with corrected catalog proofs. Mason came behind her carrying the old silver pen from the dining table. For your ledger, he said. That pen is worth more than the ledger. Then don't lose it. Grant brought the cabinet door. The finish lay even, and the repaired veneer was almost invisible unless Owen turned it toward the light. Almost. They set food across the workbench and the Bell Whitaker table Claire had borrowed from the showroom. Adults crowded the porch, trading insults, tools, bills, and stories about Rowan that contradicted one another in all the right ways. Above the door, the small bell remained in the original beam. Silas asked whether Owen planned to carve his own mark beside it. Owen looked around the porch, at Claire arguing with Ruth over coffee, Mason holding a ladder, while Jonah adjusted a light, Grant listening as Lenora corrected his version of the first table for the 3rd time. No, Owen said. This one's hers. He ran his hand over the beam, feeling the old tool marks beneath his palm. Then he stepped back into the noise of the cabin his mother had built, carrying a chair that needed one more place at the table.